Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay.
To approve the agenda?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's see, approval of minutes. Get 'em-
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to report out of closed session that we approved 4-0 the comprehensive school safety plans for Jefferson, Oceana, Thornton, Terra Nova, and Westmore High Schools. And now, for our recognitions and commendations, the recognition of the District Student of the Month for the month of January 2022. We're going to turn that over to Jefferson High School Principal, Ms. Emmendorfer.
Good evening, President Tejada, Board Trustees, and Superintendent Presta. It's a great honor that I get to present to you Shanna Chen, Jefferson Union High School District's Student of the Month, representing Jefferson High School. Jefferson High is proud to present Shanna Chen, a 12th grade student who has earned unreserved respect and accolades from students and staff alike as our District Student of the Month for January. Shanna's transition to high school was nothing short of remarkable. She jumped right in by participating in extracurricular activities and taking on student leadership roles while maintaining excellent grades. Since her freshman year, she has been an active member of the Future Business Leaders of America, Mission Fusion, Key Club, ASB Leadership, and has competed on the swim team. Shanna has dedicated countless hours to serving her community as a Key Club member. Key Club is a community service organization built around the core values of leadership, character building, caring, and inclusiveness. She embodies all of these characteristics both in the classroom, where she earned a weighted GPA of 4.16, and also while being in leadership positions and extracurricular activities. As an ASB officer, she has concurrently held 2 important roles, both as secretary and treasurer, which is a great deal of work. She is a kind and thoughtful peer mentor. She is very dependable and is often the first to respond in every ASB Executive Board group chat. After a very busy academic year, she serves as a volunteer counselor at the Chinatown Salvation Army Day Camp in the summer. Shanna challenges herself academically. Her AP Language and Composition and AP US History teachers were immediately impressed by her focus and by the level of introspection that characterized her writing. Shanna's teachers all agree that she always brings her positive spirit to her classes and everything she does. In class, Shanna is well prepared. She actively participates in Socratic groups, group activities, and projects, and is not only thinking deeply, but supporting her fellow classmates with positivity and care. Shanna is an exemplary scholar, but her grades cannot fully illustrate Shanna's phenomenal capacity to address complex issues and continually advocate and help others. Shanna intends to study biomedical engineering. Wherever Shanna decides to go, they will be lucky to have her. The Jefferson High School community is stronger because of her contributions to our classrooms and campus life. On behalf of faculty and staff, we are immensely proud of Shanna and forever grateful to her parents for entrusting us to be part of Shanna's journey.
I would like to say I've known Shanna since she was a freshman. And with my daughter, they were on student government together. They've been on student government for 4 years. And I'm so proud of you, Shanna. I just remember you as this bubbly freshman who was active in everything. And I'm so glad my daughter has you as a friend. You guys are such great leaders in ASB, and that was a core group of students. And I remember when Carly told me you got Student of the Month, you were called to Ms. Emmendorfer's office, and she said, she was scared, Mom. She was scared. And then she came back and she looked shocked. She said, I'm Student of the Month. But none of your peers were shocked. And it just goes to show how humble you are. So I'm really proud of you. We're very proud of you, and please stay in touch. Keep us posted on what you're doing, because I know you're going to do great things in the world and will continue to make us proud. So thank you. And let's take a picture.
Did any?
Thank you. I'm supposed to go faster today than everybody. Yes.
Get on over there, you two.
Activities and achievement. Yeah.
Oh, man, what people are so smart. Good day, Mike.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Good job, parents. Well done. Yes. Sorry. All right, now for the board report. Let's start with our student trustees. Let's go with our student trustee from Westmore, Mr. Abudazadeh.
Good evening, everyone. So last week was like a celebration of like the 5 languages, the 5 love languages, and then so like each day kind of had like a different theme to it, and then Friday for like acts of service, which was one of the 5 love languages. I don't know, like I don't know if this was intentional, but it kind of worked out to be like acts of service because so the FBLA Key Club and Environmental Action Clubs had planned a campus cleanup that day, last Friday. So some students showed up and like helped clean up the campus, and then so yesterday, every student in hearts were delivered with like a student's name, and staff also got hearts, so it's like a paper heart, and then like they had string, like so like they could choose to like make it into like a little necklace and wear it for the day. And yesterday was like a spirit day, like wear red, pink, or white. And I think that's all I have to report.
Rosanna?
At Terra Nova, this past Monday, they had, for Valentine's Day, the freshman class had fundraised these like cookies, and then the broadcasting club at our school had also done candygrams, so those were passed out. And then this week is Spirit Week, so we'll have a rally this Friday, and then the theme is Color Wars. It's like between the upperclassmen and the lowerclassmen, so we have like, Spirit Days every day, and it's nice. And that's all I have.
Thank Garrett.
I love that. I just want to mention I love that Westmore's active service is the love language of the school, mainly, obviously. That was wonderful. So speaking of active service, it was really nice to get together with my colleagues over the weekend and have a workshop and do our work, our active service to the community and learn to be better board members. So I really appreciate you all. And, speaking of, because it was Valentine's Day and we're talking about love, I also associate that with, just appreciation again. And that while we might not agree with everyone here, with their opinions and views, I definitely respect and appreciate everyone's perspective. I do want to make sure I do mention that and thank you all here today for all you do. Again, I do reiterate that all the time, but I'm happy to be here and do my part to serve our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ochapinti?
Yeah, it's been a busy week. First, good to hear that Spirit Week is happening again, obviously in person. A lot of things this year are first again for the first time in maybe a couple of years. Seeing that on campuses where, and on the campus where I work and, of course, across the district, is just reassuring, there's a sense of normalcy that comes with having a new normal in our schools, and part of that is having students be able to do student-initiated projects and events and activities that I think bring the life back to our schools, is what our schools and public education is about, in terms of providing those services and that space to do that. So good to see that as we go into the second semester, amid concerns, I know, of course, the pandemic, and seeing where the ups and downs are kind of taking us into a new phase in discussion of the pandemic stepping into an endemic phase. I know one thing that people have been asking about and certainly paying attention to is the changes around the school mask mandate and what that will mean for our schools, what that will mean for public places. For many counties in the Bay Area, this is a question last week, and San Mateo County has made choices inconsistent with the rest of the Bay Area through the pandemic. In this case, much of the Bay Area is choosing to move forward in relaxing some of those mandates. However, with schools, we know, and for those who may not know, our mask mandate remains. So when our students are on campus, they can be safe. And of course, our staff and anybody else in those close proximities. I want to say too that just a shout out and a thanks to everybody working around these conditions. It's been hard. There's been a lot of positive cases that kind of surged in January, but maybe changing in February. Nevertheless, we still have a lot of students and community who, of course, may be contracting COVID and doing their best to stay healthy. But just keeping that in mind, please be mindful as this mask mandate is being relaxed in the community. We all are here together and make sure we're looking out for those who are working here, our essential workers and families who may or may not have the same health care access as everybody. So a couple of things. One, to address first, last meeting, there were some public comments. I want to say first, I'm proud to hear people engaging as usual. Given my comments on the resolution and policy around civility, that's a given in our meetings. Civic engagement implies civility. That said, I still support, obviously, the freedom of speech and everybody expressing themselves at our meetings. It's good to hear people, whether they all agree on the same thing or not. This is part of the public process. One of the things I did hear, and some of the comments directed towards me, a lot of them I feel were positive, which was, it's always great because I feel like the community needs to have this platform. And in fact, these meetings are for the community to be a part of district business. These meetings are not for us to simply rubber stamp policy decisions and other things in the district. This is for us to conduct district business for the public. So this meeting is for you, anybody who wants to attend and, of course, watch and participate in any way you may want to engage in. That said, I want to reiterate that our board policy should reflect the law, that people do not have to register with their name or with an identifier like an email address. You may call in, and I feel that not just our district, but many cities and school districts in not just our county, but across the state should be adhering to better and best practices, and in fact, just legal compliance with open meeting laws and with the First Amendment. And those laws protect people from having to disclose their identity. To that effect, I have noticed that there are some callers and some people who have attended public comment who have directly targeted other callers. It is disappointing, actually, that some of our district employees were targeting former students who were speaking at our last meeting. I want to say to those who are speaking from the community, do not feel intimidated by anybody. If you feel intimidated, harassed, or targeted otherwise, directly or indirectly, feel free to speak on that at our public meetings. It's not only within your civil rights, it's also within our board policy to investigate those complaints and to take action where necessary. Retaliation is real, and we want to make sure that nobody's retaliated against simply for exercising their civil rights. To that effect, as public officials, slander is also real. There's a higher threshold for that because as public elected officials, we signed up to be your elected representatives and hear everything. That said, there were some comments targeting me, which, respectful or not, I'm not here for respectability politics, but I am here to make sure that we're conducting our meetings in a way that's productive for the community, that's not insulting or intimidating anybody. I will say to those that did speak, that have spoken, in many ways, not just disrespectfully, but promoting misinformation or even just targeting myself or other people in the community for two things, especially those who work in education. As public officials, as public servants, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So while there is a board policy now on civility, which has not been observed by many people, unfortunately, in most of the cases, attacking people who are simply defending the environment or civil rights and human rights that we should be promoting instead of profit. Unfortunately, many people have not been civil, but when you promote misinformation and you lack ethics in what you're doing, it actually creates a different conversation. And for me, I would like to say to those who obviously are speaking that way, not just to me, but to anybody in the community, and set an example for obviously those who work in education, please send the right message in whatever message you're sending by not only being ethical, but having evidence. If you're not speaking based on fact, not only are you misleading the community, you're creating a potential danger and a lack of safety for our students and our families and community to feel free to speak on these meetings. We've seen a lot of that silence, I think, enforced through the duration of this project around Serramonte Del Rey. I will be the only trustee to speak up and defend the community and those various interests that are trying to defend public land, native land, environmental science, and everything that I think our district should be moving towards. And I'm proud to see that our community has not been intimidated in doing so as well. To that effect, I'll encourage the people speaking up on public comment to continue to bring public comment. We need more of this discussion. In fact, there were 2 segments on TV last night, both Channel 5 and 7, CBS Local and ABC 7 on the Garden. And it was good to see youth and local organizing in the community speak up not only here at the Garden, but here from Shasta and across our district, and high school students and community members also at City Hall here in Daly City, outside of City Hall and at the City Council meeting later on. To call attention to that, there are a few items on tonight's agenda related to this. Unfortunately, the district is fast-tracking this development without input from the community. So I will be continuing to encourage community input and that involvement in this process, because ultimately this process doesn't exist without you. For you in the community who have the ability to vote, you voted for bond money to upgrade our school facilities, including everything from school bathrooms to athletic facilities to this district office here at Serramonte Del Rey. For those of you who did not vote, obviously, for any development project at Serramonte Del Rey, you're right, because that was never on the ballot. And so I will continue to advocate for the community that has not had a say in this, and I will continue to counter misinformation around doubling of green space when we know, in fact, bulldozing Westmore Park is deleting the net green space in our district and in our community. That said, I want to just say that moving forward and tonight, looking at these items on the agenda, I want the community to remember that there are laws that protect our community's input, our Native community's input, and environmental laws that protect our planet. And so I would encourage the community to stay involved at every point in this process. And with that, that's enough I'll leave it there.
Okay, Ms. Aludine?
Thank you. So first, I am the board clerk, and I'm learning how difficult it is to do hybrid anything. So I apologize for missing folks that were waiting to speak. It's managing multiple lists, because there's a Zoom list, there's a sheet that we're looking for people who've registered and signed up. So it was my first time with a lot of people on the list, and I apologize for not just being as thorough as I should have, and I look forward to showing you that I can fulfill the duties of clerk and make sure that everyone is heard and spoken, because that's one of the reasons why I ran as a school board member is, I was that parent in the audience who was advocating and fighting for a particular thing and wanted my voice to be heard, and would come to school board meetings and, wanting to be heard. And I never want in my duty as a trustee to be someone that doesn't let someone have their voice heard. So whether in person or via Zoom, if you're here, I want to make sure that you have your chance to speak. So just saying that. Secondly, I also will agree that we need to always try to be civil, and, you know, I have failed at that lots of times here, lots of passions kind of come into play because we're all really strong advocates for the things that we believe in. And I've really tried to moderate myself and really be respectful of all members of this board and hear all points of view. And I will say that I think that we have to be equal in that advocation of that, and that we can't just apply that to the people that agree with us, but we need to apply that to all members who come before us. And I think that same note needs to be said on having fact-based information and challenging people without full evidence or to back up what we're saying. And, you know, especially when we're talking about our own staff and accusing our staff of telling falsehoods, you know, as board trustees, we are here to ensure that our district navigates the community and all the different obstacles that are put in its place, that we do it together and as a whole body. And we're here to all take care as stewards of this district. So, you know, I was on the board at a time when we actually did have a CBO that really challenged the district, didn't work with the district. I had never in public tried to shame that CBO. So we had a superintendent who wasn't working within the best interests of the teachers and our staff and our students, and never in public did I call out and shame that superintendent, because that would not have helped elevate the district as a whole. That is not how, you know, we're a family, and I try to treat everyone in here, even because, you know, let me tell you, I have some arguments with my sisters, but I never call them out in a public way that would bring disrespect and shame on our whole family. So I think we need to, you know, the words that we speak in this room, we need to be mindful of those words, and this is calling myself out on this too, that I need to be mindful of these things, and I need to make sure that the things I say out loud, I apply to myself. So that is my call moving forward. I'm very happy that we had our study session this Saturday, and as a unit, 4 of us came and really worked on protocols and really re-examining our protocols and how we operate as a unit, and kind of a call to action on, you know, I've been on the board 9 years, right? And it's a constant re-examination of professional development, so I constantly act professionally in this role. And I'm a human being, and sometimes I fail, and the whole part of it, I try, you know, I came here and I'm in this role to do what I think is best for the district. And people may disagree with the decisions I made, but I was elected to make those decisions, and I will do that. And I fully agree that the path that we have chosen and that we voted for as a body is in the correct position, and that as board members, we need to get onto the unity of purpose, and as a board, we have voted for something, and we don't always get our way, but when we vote for something, that's what we need to do as a district, come together and move forward that purpose. So I'm very proud of the work we've done at the district. I'm proud of every member of this district, every person on this board. We have been through a whole lot together, and I hope that we can continue working together as a district to move forward in a positive way. So thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief because I know we have a fairly lengthy agenda, but you know, I echo Ms. Aludin's comments, in particular with regards to the study session and governance session that we had on Saturday, which I thought was actually very good. We were able to really get a lot of work done. And you know, just this talk on the civility policy that we passed a couple of weeks ago, the one sentence really jumps out, which is civil behavior is polite, courteous, and reasonable behavior, which is respectful to others and includes integrity, honesty, acceptance, timeliness, dependability, observance of laws and rules, and effective communication. And I think we have a duty up here, and certainly for those of us in this room, to model that for our community, to model that for those those in the community who call into these meetings, those who come in person to these meetings, or certainly we expect civility amongst our staff to students and students to staff, and of course for us to each other. we are a family. And it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, because civic engagement does not always mean civility, but we can have civic engagement with civility. And I think that's what we will be able to do moving forward. I know I've made my mistakes over the years, or my 7 years on the board, and I strive to do better every single day. So thank you all.
Thank you. I don't have a whole lot to say, except thanks for reminding us we are a family. We've been through a lot together. We've been through a lot together, like several superintendents together kind of thing. And how many have we hired? Oh my gosh. So we're on the right path right now, and we've got to stay together. And I agree, civility doesn't mean we're infringing on someone's First Amendment rights. We protect speech, but I just want to be sure that everyone's going to respect each other, if you can. I know passions overflow, but this is for everyone in the room, everyone who calls in, everyone who makes public comment in person. Let's try to do better and respect each other. Because I'm also mindful that we have student trustees here, and we're modeling for them. They are our leaders of the future. They're current leaders at their schools, and they have modeled integrity for us, and we need to do the same for them. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Presta for your report.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start off with the COVID report, just to let everybody know that I'm really grateful to our COVID director, Ms. Jones, for getting in a really fast turnaround fashion the rapid tests to send home with staff and students. We purchased enough for both President's Week and spring break. And so that's great news. They were delivered, and they should already actually be at the schools and ready to go home. We also received many tests from the state. I think it was over 600 tests, rapid tests from the state, with the intended use of sending home with staff members when needed. We're kind of holding them all. We have some extras now, which is a good place to be. Since we didn't have them at winter break, the numbers that we needed. So that's great news. I also did want to address, I sent home this afternoon an all-community bulletin so that everybody's really aware of the mask protocols here at school. So while the mask mandate might be being lifted for other venues, it is not lifted for schools. So we will continue with the mask mandate that we have had. There's no change in schools. So just wanted to be really clear about that. Other than that, I really want to say that we can get very caught up in things that are not teaching and learning sometimes at these meetings. And I just want to direct our attention back to teaching and learning and students. And remember that that's why we're here. And every week I visit different school sites, oftentimes with Miss Casey, our union president, sometimes on my own. And this week we had a really nice visit at Westmore High School just yesterday. And I just want to call out, I learned of the 5 love languages. I did not know about them. So I got to learn something new when I was at Westmore. And I was we spent a lot of time in the math and science classrooms, happenstance. And I would just be really excited to be in any number of classrooms that I entered yesterday. Miss Tia had cow hearts and pig hearts, and because it was Valentine's Day, so it was awesome. I was in Miss Fuentes Phillips' classroom, and they were doing some physics, I guess. They were, you know those head massagers that you put on your head, and they were pinging them and looking at the vibrations, and You know, honestly, I was just really proud of our teachers and our staffs that throughout kind of all of the noise that's going on, I'm very, very proud of our schools. So I wanted to say that. And then finally, in last week's community message, I sent home some information for Black History Month. There's a series called Black History, Freedom, and Love, Lessons from Influential Black Voices. I think it originated on Masterclass, but you can see it this month on Amazon Prime. And it's just a really, really great thing to watch. So I wanted to mention it again. You can look in my message from last Friday if you want to find that information, or just look on Amazon Prime or Masterclass. But wanted to encourage everybody to take a look at that. And then finally, next week is President's Week, and so Monday and Friday are official holidays. The students and teachers will be off next week, and many of our staff members will be off for the whole week. But the district office will be open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Thank you.
All right, thank you. AFT Local 1481 report. Ms. Casey?
Hello. I'm going to make this very quick because I'd like to spend more time on my public comment. CFT has been advocating for the mask mandate to stay in effect at schools. Many of us, the presidents, have spoken to our CFT president, who is in contact with the governor. And, you know, I think it's kind of interesting that 2 weeks ago we were saying we all had to have KN95s, and then, you know, tomorrow or today it's just like, oh, whatever. So we've been talking about wanting to make sure that we stay safe, that we have masks, and as we start to lessen the mask mandate, that we have other ways of deciding whether it's safe. You know, we still need to do testing. We should be able to test everybody. So there's a lot of things in play. So don't, we're all excited to be free of our masks, you know, but we need to really make sure we're safe. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda items.
Move to approve?
Mr. Ochapinti has his hand raised.
Yeah, let's pull two items, 13C 113 and 13C 12.
Would like to pull those?
Yes.
Or 13C12, you said?
13,
C113. That's
13C 12.
the SCI Consulting
Actually,
Group.
it should be 12, sorry.
So what was the other one? What's the name of the contract?
It's 12, it should be actually, yeah.
13C12.
12. It's a- yeah.
A stop-bowl certificate
Oh,
of
the
901
stop-bowl,
Campus
okay.
Drive.
Yeah.
Oh, got it, okay. All right, let's do that. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with those items pulled?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, so let's see. 13. So we're going to move those to action. And now it's on to public comment. Do we have any public comment, Ms. Saladin?
Yes, we do. So before we get started with public comment, this is just a reminder to everyone, either here or on Zoom, that they have 3 minutes to give public comment, that this area of the agenda is reserved for those to speak on an item that isn't currently on our agenda for tonight. That will call each of you, and we'll let you know when your 3 minutes have started, and then I'll let you know when your 3 minutes have ended. And we cannot respond to any items that is not on the agenda, so while we may give some direction, we can't directly respond. Okay, so with that, our first speaker is Ed Lopez.
Good evening, everybody. I actually wrote it down first. I'd first like to speak on my class. As many of you know, I'm an instructor of the JUHSD Wilderness School, and we've had a garden at our site for more than 25 years. During this time, we've provided fresh produce and eggs for our neighbors, a place to deposit compostable waste, and provide gardening instruction for elementary and high school students. This year will be the first year that we will not have fully planted a garden or had a full pond. And many of you have come to the garden and got produce. Why? Because of the ongoing drought. And I cannot, in good conscience, we cannot plant to the extent that we have in the past without installing a water irrigation system to minimize waste. So when I see the water waste and disregard for drought conditions here at the Serramonte Del Rey Garden, I demand that the board and the administration take immediate control of the garden and put an end to the water mismanagement that is occurring there. The second item that I want to speak about is about the proposed, I've been hearing talk about land acknowledgements. I'm against it, unless there is a plan that is sustainable and has teeth. Too often, actions like land acknowledgements only serve the conscience of those making the proposal, or the renaming of a school or a street is just that, and nothing more than an empty promise. So what I want to know, if you're going to make a land acknowledgement, what are you going to do about it? A sign or a garden is not sufficient. As our community proposes to go forward with actions like this, we should remember the sage advice of comedian Chris Rock when he said, when one finds yourself on, what do you do when one finds yourself on a street named MLK? So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker is Monica Casey.
Good evening again. The majority of my comments are directed towards Trustee Ochapente. I want to make sure that he remains informed about emails that are being directed towards select members of the JHSD board, staff, my union siblings, because he was not included on most of the recipient lists. I will give him this note so he can see who the senders are. Of someone named Norm, Superstar, Celebrate for Lifers, Perry, KC. In their emails, they attack members of the JUHSD based on their physical appearances in such negative and degrading ways, especially to women. Separately, they put down my union siblings and try to say that my union brother did not serve our country as a Marine. We know his past and his records, and I'm appalled that they would try to slander him in such a way. What I find amazing is that these people call themselves community activists, yet they hide behind anonymous, faceless voices. Why don't you come, stand here in front of us, and speak as human beings? Here are some examples of the negative statements in their emails. Make sure you remove your Krispy Kreme donut boxes and wipe down your desks. We don't want to get any diseases from you guys. It appears that your representation as a corporal online is a fraud. This is stolen valor. You've been living a lie for approximately 15 years, and it takes a superstar and others to wreck your life in 4 days. Yeah, babe, 4 days. Check yourself into the nearest mental health clinic. Godspeed to your mental wellness. Hopefully, Trustee Ochapente is able to prove that he is not connected to these people in their comments. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Sean Carcases.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, members of the board, our community. My name is Sean Carcases. I'm a history teacher, coach, a class advisor, a veteran, a TN alumni, and a member of our community. 2 weeks ago, my wife and I made a public comment in regards to the garden and the SDR housing project. We spoke passionately emotionally because this project is important to the future of our colleagues, students, families, and the district as a whole. After sharing our thoughts, we began to receive an onslaught of attacks from supporters of the garden. I have received many offensive emails and calls to the district to terminate me after serving 5 years in JUHSD. These emails are both inappropriate, vicious in nature, and question my integrity, my wife's and my mental stability, my status as a veteran. To imply that I suffer from PTSD simply because I'm a veteran of the armed forces is not only disrespectful to me, but to anyone who has ever served our country. It is also very triggering, as I, like many veterans, have lost friends to suicide because of suffering from PTSD. This group went on a deep dive down the internet and went into the lives of my wife, my friends, and my family. I should not have to address this, but due to the circumstances surrounding this issue, I feel it is my responsibility to address some horrific accusations made by that group to provide context. A photo of me and a fellow Marine was posted online, and my moral character has been unfairly attacked. I'm not ashamed of this photo, as it was taken 15 years ago while serving my country on deployment in Iraq. Accusations are made that I was mocking and appropriating Palestinian culture. This could not be further than the truth. This photo was taken after a trade with some citizens of Ramadi, Iraq. Trading is a normal practice for Marines when deployed as a way to connecting with local people. In exchange for supplies, this local man offered me his keffiyeh as a sign of gratitude. The interpreter asked us to put it on and take a photo, so we did, never trying to disrespect or cause any harm to the Iraqi people, and especially not to the Palestinian people. I took personal offense to this as a world history teacher because we deeply value learning about all cultures and this rich history that we have. I love what I do. I care about our community. Teaching our youth is what I've always wanted to do in life. I don't want to say that I still support, I do want to say that I still support the SDR project. And I strongly believe that it benefits our entire community. Now, thank you for your time, and please stop.
Our next speaker is on the sheet is SB Skylar Berliner.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I am a student in Jefferson Union High School District, and I'm here to talk about the issue of the community garden and the new housing development project. I would firstly like to state that I'm not being coerced into saying any of this. This is all of my own accord and from my own research and experiences. As a student in this district, I have personally had experience with the impacts of the district's lack of affluence. I have had experience with the teacher shortage, not having a permanent teacher for extended periods of time, simply because our district's pay is not appealing to new applicants. I have had teachers and no teachers and staff who have moved districts right next to us because their pay rate is so much higher. I have experienced issues with the maintenance of the school building because of a lack of funding, and most importantly, I know that my teachers and the staff in this district work so hard and diligently at what they do and deserve a pay that can sustain themselves and their families. It's not easy working with high school students, and they play such a vital role in our community. They deserve a livable wage, especially with the cost of housing here. This housing project is meant to give funds to our district and give affordable housing to our teachers so that maybe in the future, our staff can be paid what they deserve, and our schools can be the educational environments that can lead me and my fellow students to a brighter future. Furthermore, I have found that the change.org being mentioned can be pretty misleading. Titled, Helps Save Daly City's Only Community Garden. Of course, people are going to want to vote on it. However, it does contain outdated information, such as that the district did not offer to construct a new garden or communicate with the gardeners to help construct one, and the way the profit from the project will be utilized. And it portrays the district as a corrupt corporation rather than just a school district trying to stabilize its funds so it can benefit the education of its students. While I appreciate this community garden for what it does for some members of the community, I'm sure with the support it has, it would be possible to create a new, more spacious, healthy, and legal community garden with the help of the district and possibly with funds from its 5,000 supporters. Lastly, I would like to say that if we have to sacrifice a community garden that only benefits some of the community, which uses it consistently, for a housing project that can support thousands of students' educations and teachers' livelihoods continuously for years to come, as a student of this district, I believe that that is worth it. So thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you take what I said into consideration and think about the possibilities that a project like this could help in our students' education. Thank you.
Speaker is Humanity on the sheet. Is Humanity on the line? No? Is there someone on the phone? Was that? Okay. Hello? Next speaker is Jonathan Krupp.
Hello? Hello? Here. Yeah. Great. Okay, I have 3 minutes now. Okay, so looking up the word school, what is the definition of school? Is this a place for children and young adults to be educated? If one young adult, one child needs access to that garden, the whole project's off. Because the school is surrounded around the students. Without the students, there's no school. Without the school, without the students, there's no teachers. You gotta make sure we understand it. Now, who actually funds the school? The public, the taxpayer. That would be me. It's not a fundraiser that someone has. It's not selling chocolate bars at Target. It's the taxpayer. The taxpayer owns City Hall. The taxpayer owns California State Governor's Mansion. The taxpayer owns the White House. The taxpayer funds everything. So when you refer to the school owning the property, the taxpayer owns the property. Therefore, the taxpayer, the public, the community need not purchase anything from the school. So hopefully that's clear. I'm not quite sure. Maybe a tutor from the library could help. That's the way I see it. With regards to Marines, there are Marines buried at Golden Gate National Cemetery. They're buried in uniform. And if the Marine Corps in San Bruno states that this individual is not a Marine, I would take their word for it. And that Marine should meet the Marine Corps who states he is not a Marine. Simple as that. San Bruno, Commodore Lane, do it. Okay, next. With regards to my name being mentioned, whether I'm the public, I'm the superstar, I am the taxpayer. I own City Hall. I own the school. So students, if you're listening, profanity was used by a teacher at last council meeting. He should have been removed from his position immediately. Secondly, I want a transcript from the Saturday meeting. It was open for public comment. It's yet to be online on the video online, but a transcript is needed. Okay, so hopefully that resolves a lot of the issues. With regards to the gardens are a sacred place for the children, for the community. It is cathartic for the children. I heard the other night that students were crying because they did not have access to the gardens. Again, the school, the definition of a school, it's for the education of the children, the students. We're not grandstanding and talking about our new political career.
Next up is Jonathan Krupp.
Good evening, board members. Can you hear me? Thank you. Dear members of the board, I am speaking today on behalf of two colleagues who were unfairly slandered by certain members of the community at the last board meeting on Tuesday, February 1st. They were attacked simply for expressing their First Amendment rights, the same First Amendment rights that the previously mentioned members of the community were happy to utilize. I understand that the SDR redevelopment project is highly contentious, and people on both sides of the aisle are passionate about their views. I also understand that some people do not see eye to eye with Mr. and Mrs. Carcazes, but the vicious personal attacks leveled at them were entirely unacceptable in a community that claims to promote civil discourse. I have worked in the district for 13 years, all of them at Terra Nova, and I cannot think of two colleagues that are as dedicated to the student population as they are. Here are just a few of the criticisms lobbed at them. From Norm Pinto, you are to retract your little sick PTSD statements and issue a public apology to Superstar. The public pays your salary, servant, and little Ashley's too. From Superstar, real men go out in the world and make $200,000 to $300,000 a year. This guy is a joke. From Celebrate for Lifers, needless to say, the students should not be around a very, very sick, mentally ill, hostile, angry, indigent powder keg that Sean Carcazes is. From SD Destroyer 3, we have demanded the immediate dishonorable discharge of a fraudulent teacher and low-life human being, as this matter will be investigated and prosecuted. From Celebrate for Lifers, now all of you, if you can read, understand how we are the public, the community, and people, and you are our servants. Thankfully, some members of the community recognize that these condemnations were beyond the pale. Thank you, JCU and JW. These emails constitute libel, but luckily the writers are afforded the broad protections of the First Amendment. In a civilized society, it is reprehensible to see individuals act like online bullies hiding behind pseudonyms. To prove my point, the speaker before me refuses to identify himself. To add to the absurdity, some of the aforementioned individuals have lobbed online attacks at some of our students who had the guts to support Mr. and Mrs. Carcazes. And it strikes me as ironic that members of a predominantly working class community who claim to support an end to unjust labor practices refer to those who have dedicated their lives to educating the next generation as servants. My life's work isn't a joke, Superstar Billy. I have not, nor will I ever bow to anyone. Celebrate for Lifers. Thank you for your time.
Speaker is Eric Wilmsey.
Good evening, esteemed members of the board. My name is Eric Willemsey, and I'm a social science teacher at Terra Nova High School in our district. And I came here to say two things. The first, I really want to commend the district's decision to put security measures in place to protect the district-owned garden. Second, I would like to voice my support for all of my fellow educators who have come under attack for supporting the district's aforementioned decision. I have read with great disdain many of our community members' attacks on their characters. I want to reiterate our board's call for civility and a call on these community members to end these personal attacks on my fellow educators so that they can focus on what they do best and what the board mentioned earlier, focusing our energy on educating our students. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ray Mullen.
Hello. Okay. Hello, my name's Ray Mullen. I've been a Terra Nova teacher now for 23 years. I've been a teacher for 23 years, all in the district. Sean Carcazes, this is about the previous topics mentioned. Sean Carcazes was one of my first students. He went on to serve the U.S., come back as a teacher, phenomenal teacher, engaging, reaches out to students at a new age of media that engages them at their level. The things I read, beyond atrocious, beyond personal. But what I find very interesting is this idea that we are owned by the taxpayer. I am a taxpayer. Everyone is a taxpayer. It seems a few people believe they are the taxpayers who should make the decisions for all. That is not how this goes. What the Carcazes were trying to do is try to increase support for the resources to make sustainable teachers in our district so they don't leave. That is what they were doing. They put out their opinions, they put out all their reasonings, and then the attacks started. It has already been illuminated what this is about. However, one thing I did find interesting is this idea of the garden being for children. It is not a community garden. Community gardens actually have buy-in. People have investments. It's just some people who use some land, and that's it. It is not a community garden. It would be no different than if I came to someone's house and decided to use a little piece of property they didn't see and go, well, that's a community garden now. The ownership is the taxpayer, the ownership is the district. The ownership ultimately is back to the state. It is not even the taxpayer. But let me say, I am a taxpayer. I worked for me, and I've had a real job outside schools. I never thought teachers worked for me. All you have to do is see the amount of teachers leaving the profession. They'll go to other jobs. Who doesn't want to hire a teacher? The people who say you should make $200,000 a year. If I walk in, I've managed teenagers for 2 decades. How's that for a, whatever you want? A lot of people are going to want to hire us as managers. So what they did is try to get the support for resources. But let me put it on record. I am Ray Mullen at Terra Nova. I'm not going to hide behind anonymous. And what the person who called in, it was interesting when they referred to being attacked earlier. How do we know they were attacked? So that is one thing. Finally, too, because I didn't pre-write this, was I would be interested to see the board individually say if they support or disapprove of what has happened. I know you can't, but that is what I'd be interested to hear, because one person's opinions especially. Thank you.
So the next speaker, I don't know if they're on the call, initials KM. Can you raise your hand if you're on Zoom? Nothing? Okay, so our next speaker, initials XV. XV is in Victor.
Hello. I am a student from Terra Nova. Hello, this is XB. I am a student from Terra Nova High School, and I'm first going to disclose I was not coerced into going to this Zoom and speaking. This is all my free will, and I'm just speaking my opinion. So what I'd like to talk about. Is this better? Hi. Okay, so I am a student from Serramonte High School, and I'm speaking my free opinion and my own thought. And so what I would like to talk about is the harassment that 2 teachers there, Mr. and Mrs. K, or Sean Carcases and Ashley Carcases, have been receiving since the last board meeting. And so what I would like to say is what I believe. I do not agree with these horrendous and cowardly acts against these 2 amazing teachers who basically I see as they bring a new teaching way to the class. It makes it interesting. And I do not believe that these people attacking them have the right to oppress them when they are speaking their thoughts, which is given to them by the First Amendment. Not only do they disrespect them, they threaten them, and for the people who they know who they are, if they're trying to set an example for kids, like the last caller stated, the only example they are setting is that people who don't agree with you should be oppressed, and basically the right of free speech should be thrown out the window. And so additionally, I do not understand why they were attacked when the people of the garden were offered that the garden would not only be doubled in size, it could stay there, which seems I don't understand it, because it would be in terms of a win-win situation. The garden would still be there, and the teacher shortage have a fix to it, because this project would guarantee teachers saying students would learn. So I'm just trying to say, as a student, I do not agree with these horrendous statements, these attacks against the teachers over this concept. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a lovely day.
So the last speaker on the list, I don't know if their call initials TW. Is anyone TW? Nope. Okay, those are all the public comments for tonight.
Great, thank you.
Or just showed up? Okay, hold on one sec. Okay, so is Gio Napoli on the Zoom? They're not on. Okay. So that's all the speakers we have on the call for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on to our discussion items. 15A, the supplement to the annual update to the 2021-22 Local Control and Accountability Plan and mid-year updates. Deputy Superintendent Baca.
Good evening, President Tejada. Good evening, members of the board. This is the report that you've been waiting for. Teaching and learning. I'm so excited. And so, let's start. And the report is pretty long, and I just want to give you a heads up that I will be highlighting some of the actions and metrics on this report, and on the April 23rd study session, we can go in more depth with this information. So the purpose for tonight is to receive the mid-year LCAP implementation expenditures and metrics, and also information on the supplement to the annual update. And so the topics covered are just a little bit of background information on the updated budget overview for parents, the mid-year LCAP updates, and then supplement to the annual update. So with AB 130, as you know, we received more funds this year from COVID relief funds. And because of that, there is a requirement that the board receives information on our supplement to the annual update, and also the mid-year LCAP related to metrics that was passed by the board this year. So that's AB 130. And here is the updated budget overview for parents. So the middle column is what was adopted when the LCAP was adopted. That was the preliminary amount. And then the third column is the final budget that we received. And here's the LCAP goal summary. So in the past, we've had 3 goals, 3 broad goals, but this year, there's actually 7 goals. So the first 2 goals are very similar from what we've had before. So goal number 1 is really college and career readiness. Goal 2 is about social emotional wellness and mental health supports. Goal 3, we really focused is on our equity and inclusion practices and actions and services. Goals 4 and 5 are more focused goal for students learning English, with goal 4 being the college and career indicator, and then goal 5 is the intake process for students learning English. Goal 6 is about the graduation rate for students with IEP, and then goal 7 is maintaining our standards operations for the district. So again, with goal 1, it's to prepare students for success in post-secondary learning and careers. So as you know, Jefferson Union's vision is to prepare our students for not just in high school, but for when they graduate and leave our district. So just really quickly, let me orient you to how this works. So on the very left-hand side is the main action. And then the next column are the sub-actions. And how this is presented is that the ones with the green dots means that it's been completed or an adequate progress has been made. The yellow ones is a little slow progress or inconsistent implementation. So as an example, maybe one high school is implementing it while the other is not. And as we know, COVID has put a lot of pause in a lot of the things that we have done. But I just want to say that I'm really proud of the progress that we've made despite all of the COVID issues that we've had. The red dot is we have not started yet. So with LCAP Goal 1, I just want to summarize and bring again, highlight some of the actions. So Goal 1 is aligning our curriculum and instruction and benchmark assessments. We also wanted to adopt universal design for learning and then also strengthen our professional learning communities. Also, we included our technology plan, which is really to support what we're trying to do in curriculum and instruction. So those are our tools. And we also have some staff to support curriculum and instruction, which is our instructional coaching program. And then we also focus on instructional key strategies, which is constructing meaning. And also, Westmore has piloted Modern Classroom this year. Implementation for that. And also I wanted to bring up the things that we are doing to increase college and career access for our students. So that's sub-action 8. Sub-action 9 is our career technical education program. And so right now there's one thing that I'm really super proud of because under the leadership of Ms. Denise Shreve, our CTE program has blossomed. This is our English language development program. And again, under the leadership of Dr. Robinson, we are doing really, really well and progressing, moving forward for our students learning English. Also, I included our special education program in Goal 1. And then it also includes our student study teams so that we have some actions if students are not performing the way we expect them to perform. We've added that there. And also, because we were identified as a comprehensive support and improvement school under Thornton High School, I've added what Thornton High School has been doing to meet their college and career readiness. And here are the metrics and the results. And let me orient you to this. So the green ones means that the outcome is known. It's pretty much final, and that is it. We've received that from the state. The yellow ones is that outcome is still in progress. So we've measured it from the beginning of the year to where we are right now, and that it will change at the end of the year. The red one is we don't know what the outcome is. Either we haven't measured it, we haven't done anything about it just yet, but we don't know what the outcome is yet. There's a couple of things I want to highlight here. The MDTP and the STAR ELA, because this is the first year where we actually have a common benchmark assessment district-wide for math and for English. And the way this was, the metric was set up is we didn't put a floor or a ceiling. What we basically looked at, we looked at per individual student, which students improve from the fall to the winter and to the spring. So we're really just looking at their growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So the MDTP, the Math Benchmark Assessment, this is from fall to winter, and this is separated by each of the math courses. And the target was 75% by 23-24. The first time we've ever done this, we're at 69, 60, and 63, which is not bad at all. Same thing with STAR ELA for our English language arts. So district average is 48%. I want to point out that with Jefferson, with their 4x4 schedule, that is pretty much their whole entire year. So I separated Jefferson High School because they completed their English within one semester. The other thing that I want to point out is the least restrictive environment. So there is a metric by the state that we should fit that at least 52.2% of our students are enrolled in at least 80% of in the general setting, like general ed setting. So that's set by the state. So back in, I believe that's 2018-19, that data, we were at like 25.27%. And as you can see, we're up to 46%. And I wanna commend our directors of special education because one of the things that was done at the end of last year and implement this year is to standardize the calculation for least restrictive environment. Just get some more. And in addition, we also have some co-taught classes for this year. I'm going to highlight our 4-year plan completion rate. Here's AP courses, access to at least one AP courses. AP scores of at least 3. Smarter balance. I want to point something out with the smarter balance because if you look at our score, it's 75.6% from last year. And that is pretty high because typically in language arts, we would get about 50, 55. Same thing for math. We are typically at about 28 to 35%, more or less. But as you can see, we're at 50%. And I want to let you know that the participation rate from last year was quite low. I want to say only about half of our students opted into taking the exam. And probably because of that, our scores were much, much higher. So I would kind of put, an asterisk on this score because of the participation rate. PFT, this year, it was suspended last year, but this year it is required that PFT is administered to all of the 9th grade students. But this is the first year where they will not be collecting height and weight for the BMI. And also for this year, they're only looking at participation rate and not actual scores. And there's our EL rate, EL classification rate, which I do not know yet. And then the 4-year graduation cohort rate. Here's Thornton High School. I just want to say that Thornton High School has actually exited out of the CSI identification this year. And so they have met their graduation rate. So kudos to Dr. Marenko and the Thornton staff. There's our, the other pathways and the metrics also. There is one thing that I want to highlight, the college acceptance rate. I will change this to college going rate because it's not just really about getting accepted, but who is going into 2 or 4-year college. So this data is from the National Student Clearinghouse, and there was a decline of students who entered 2nd or 4-year college right after high school, and this was the class of 2021. And this was probably due to COVID. And so some of the highlights that I want to give shout out to is our instructional coaches. It's been going strong. We've had this program since probably 2012, 2013, and our coaches have been instrumental in supporting our teachers. CTE program, again, we have capstone projects now where there's a common project for all of the CTE courses. Great progress. We've also increased our LRE, least restrictive environment. So more students are accessing the general education setting with the support of our case managers. And Thornton High School exiting out of CSI is amazing. A few areas of growth is, so this year, the collaboration time has increased in its frequency. Instead of every 2 weeks, it's now every week. So there's a lot more chance for collaboration. But what we really need to strengthen on is for the course-alike teams. So let's say just all of the biology teachers looking at their curriculum and identifying the learning targets for students. So instead of just meeting as a whole department where they're teaching a whole bunch of different classes, grouping them based on what they're teaching and identifying what students should be learning is very, very important. The other thing that we need to really work on is universally designed lessons. So I want to point out that Dr. Robinson and Lee Medvedev have started this learning community of several teachers to really explore and figure out how are we going to implement UDL as a district. So it's a cohort model. They have, they've identified themselves as wanting to be the first, pilot for UDL. And so I'm very excited about that. I also want to point out that in our instructional council with our principals and directors, we have been reading the UDL playbook for administrators so that we are all on the same page. And also we need to work on providing some academic tier 2 intervention. So I'm going to stop there for any clarification questions because that was a lot.
Questions? Mr. Chapinti?
Yeah, first, thank you for his presentation. Of course, I know there's more, but yeah, so this part is good to see that we're making progress when it comes to LRE. For many who do not know, like the full extent of that, it's looking at inclusion, right, of all of our students who may have services with an IEP, to special education, in the general education environment. So basically, our students being integrated with the rest of the students on a given campus is a major part of special education, because all of our students who receive special education services are students in general education. And so in my experience, a lot of our students receive those services through small day classes or SDC class settings, or otherwise separate settings for any other part of the services, won't necessarily have the same level of LRE, and so inclusion. And so I guess my first thought is it's good to see that UDL, that Universal Design for Learning, that this is being promoted and being integrated. It's an approach, I know from general education standpoint and special education standpoint, that brings us closer together in terms of creating collaborative environments, and I think curriculum across both spaces. So my first question would be, with respect to UDL and increasing that, which is, I think, a major first step, I heard you did mention co-teaching, or there's some co-taught classes. The LRE numbers, they're still pretty low. They're at 46%. For it to jump to, say, 80, where we want to be, or where the target is in terms of statewide goals or whatever, that would require, to me, I guess my question is, are we still at 46% because not all classes at every site are moving in that direction, or are there certain sites altogether that still are leaning on SDC classes instead of moving in towards co-taught? Is there something that, how is the status shifting at what sites, and where do you see that moving this year?
Every site is different. As you know, Oceana has had their co-taught classes for a really long time. And also, we're kind of starting where each of the school site is, because co-teaching won't really work if the mindset is not there. So we rather would start just much slower and do it right, and would have the, the openness of the staff to be able to co-teach. So with that, Terra Nova has started co-teaching in their math classes. And they are, going to continue to do that. Jefferson also, with one math class, started a co-taught class this year. And they are also interested in having a co-taught class next year in science and chemistry. At Westmore, there is one class, I believe it's biology, where it is co-taught. So again, we're, starting slow. And we're really, trying to provide all the support that we can for co-teaching. So we've had quite a few teachers that went to Anaheim to really learn about co-teaching.
That's good. I was going to say, I've attended trainings in co-teaching, and I've been a co-teacher for many years, so that it is helpful to see the training. In terms of mindset, I think of mindset as professional development. If people haven't learned, then they won't know how to implement it. I guess my question, the follow-up question just to that is, in terms of promoting that, I'm noticing, it's good to hear that Westmore finally has one co-taught class, biology, and Jefferson as well, two, right, math and science. Do we have a timeline or some kind of estimate? I mean, these are LCAP goals, and so is there some kind of, I'm sure the discussion's happening, but is there a timeline that, and maybe I guess our site leaders can speak to this more, but where we can kind of set ourselves to like encouraging our site leaders to look at the LCAP and where the state is, and knowing that we cannot stay at that level. It's not equitable, right? Like our students with special education services should have the same access. What kind of discussions or how often are those discussions happening this year? I know it's our first year back in person, so space for collaboration is there, but yeah, do we have any timeline that you're hearing that people are optimistic about or are looking forward to?
Before you answer, can I piggyback on that, just because it's just to join so we can actually have like a conversation, if possible?
Sure.
It's because I do want to note that I agree with you on that point that, you know, we really need to look at like staffing levels, but that's like a big issue is like staffing levels. You know, we can only do this if we have the staff. And so I think that especially seeing that special education teachers are some of the hardest teachers to hire, you know, it would be, I think really the things that we should be looking at is the projections of who's retiring, because who can we retain, you know, and for our current, and versus, and then looking at how many people we're gonna need to hire. So, because I think that will inform us more on like what goals we can be able to attain. We need to have the staff in place to do that.
Okay, just to clarify what you're asking, you're saying we need to know who's retiring and who's going to be hired before we make these decisions or think about these discussions, or?
Yeah, I think, you know, we can put as many goals in place, but if we don't have the staff in order to do or reach the goals, it'd be really hard to do that, especially if you're talking about co-teaching. So for one class, where it's hard enough to find one special education teacher, you're saying you want to expand co-teaching, which will require two teachers, something, and we need to look at, we know, you know, I don't know, we know it's strong, but I'm saying that in hearing from staff and how hard this year has been, I'm extremely worried about our ability to retain staff. And especially in the areas that it is really a challenge to be a teacher every day. And we know that special education teachers and their support staff, that is a very tough job. So I'm worried about retention levels in those areas. And then we know that the call has gone out already for like who's looking to retire. So there may be some data on that. And also looking at spots that we need to fill. So I think looking at where we're gonna have gaps and also where we're also knowing that spots we haven't filled yet will give us an idea of what we're capable for in the next school year, what we're capable of doing.
I hear what you're saying. I'll just quickly, just to respond, because I'm a teacher in special education, and I've worked in RSP, SDC, co-teaching settings. And this is why I asked the question, because I want to see where the pulse of our district is. To speak to that, just one thing is, I think, and this is just something as a fact of life, is people will retire, and this year has been an up and down, even just with health conditions. There are some teachers who are considering, you know, an earlier retirement than usual. Unfortunately, this is the world that we're living in, so there is that pressure. The other part of that, though, is we can never know who's going to apply and who we're going to hire over the summer to replace those people. So the expectation of our district should be that we're going to find somebody to teach those students in that class. There's, you know, case management, there's caseloads that have to be attended to. So if even our district level, you know, is taking on some of those responsibilities and understanding how we can do that, I have faith in our HR to be able to get that done. The first part, I think, is, and the second part of that, I guess, is in terms of retention. One of the things about co-teaching, and maybe people who have attended the training can attest to this, is co-teaching can be done with the same level of staffing. It just means that not only will the students be integrated into our mainstream general education classes, our teachers will also be integrated. That's what co-teaching is. So instead of holding a separate class, you as a teacher and the students will be integrated into general education classes. So it actually wouldn't necessarily change the staffing numbers. Ideally, we want more.
That's not true in every case, though, because if we do have a class, so, you know, from experience of my son being in an SDC class, you can't just take a whole SDC class and put it into a regular class. They all have different needs. So if you take that one teacher and put it into a class, so all those students can't go in there, where are the rest of the students gonna go and who's gonna co-teach those students? So it does require more staff.
Well, an SDC class would still have a teacher.
Right, with one teacher.
Right,
And if the students go into different classes, they're gonna need a co-teacher in each one of the classes. So
That's
that's
what-
what require more teachers.
Not necessarily. It could, but in ideally, you would have more teachers teaching that. However, given master scheduling and in terms of looking at the bigger picture, it's ideal to have that. I've worked at schools where we've been understaffed, we've been at work. I've been at schools where we're more fully staffed, and it's worked just as well.
Hey, we'll just have to debate. I'm just saying, we just
yeah.
need to look at the staff reports. I'm just trying to see if we can get staff reports, that's all.
Right, so I thank you for that. I appreciate that input. Going back to discussion, taking a pulse of those discussions.
I think too, that just to share the space, Superintendent Presto.
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that Deputy Superintendent Baca has a pretty hefty presentation. I wanted to make sure that she had time. I respectfully, if you have a question for her that she can answer right here, that's wonderful, but we might need to take questions that she can answer at a later date so that she can get through the presentation.
And we have the study session coming up. So I was just wanting to toss
I
out.
want to make sure you get your question answered, but.
Are you asking, making sure I get it answered here or not in public? I just want to make sure.
No, if there's a question, there was a large discussion back and forth that we're having right now, and I just wanted to make sure,
Right.
is there a question for Ms. Baca to answer?
That was my question. What is the pulse of our teachers in the districts in terms of where they're looking at timeline-wise? How many years will they look at maybe shifting some of the SDC allocated, classroom settings to moving more towards a co-top model?
Not just there yet. We just started the conversation. This is really the first year we're really, making inclusion as one of our goals.
Okay.
So, we'll provide you with updates, and we will talk with, our site administrators and our directors and work collaboratively.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And just really quickly, for the study session, I wanted to look at, I know we're using BMI, but BMI also historically has not been fully inclusive of all ethnic backgrounds. So just to look at that, I'm glad that we're looking at college going rates, but are we just to keep both college acceptance and college going rates? And then my last question was on the IEP process, and so I know we're going to deep dive more into that in the study session. So those are my only call outs.
I want to make a correction. So they are not collecting BMI for the first time. So before they did, because they collected height and weight, but now they're not going to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Decided that it's.
Oh, thanks, finally. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So goal number 2, so I'm going to combine goal 2 and 3, and then 4, 5, and then 6, 7, is to create a meaningful and supportive and inclusive space for all students. So this talks about our social emotional learning curriculum that we're implementing this year for students in grades 9 through 10. And also providing staff training for trauma-informed practices through community resilience. Also training for restorative practices, and then our integrated mental health, wellness, and support. In addition, Ms. Basuino is working on the restorative discipline matrix, and we're gonna call it the solution matrix, I believe. Full of solutions. And we will.
What do you call it?
Full of solutions.
Full of solutions. That's her nickname.
As we know. And we'll actually go in depth with the solution matrix during our April 23rd study session as well. We have to monitor student attendance and also our VPs to oversee this goal, which used to be our Dean of Students in the past few years. And here are the metrics, and I want to, call out chronic absenteeism. That is, it's increased a lot from last year. So student engagement and absences, it's something that we are working on how to re-engage our students back. Suspension rate, because, Ms. Basuino, again, is so great. We're basically 0%. This was from last year. And again, we're in distance learning. until March. And so there was one student last year that was suspended. So that was, an asterisk year again. But even though last year we're in distance learning, it's all 0%, I just want to point out that the trend for suspension rate has been going down in the last few years. Some things to be proud of are increased mental health staff this year. We have our social emotional learning curriculum. We have lots of professional development on wellness and are, again, trending lower suspension rate. One of the areas that we could work on is we have the curriculum that was, rolled out sometime in the summer, and our teachers really need some time for planning. So we want to set aside some funds and for some time during the summer for staff to collaborate. Also, we have a lot of wellness services, but we could do a better job of promoting our services to our students and families. And again, as I mentioned, outreach to our students who've been chronically absent. Goal number 3 is about equity and inclusion. So this is pulled out of our equity statement, and that is our goal. And some of the actions is providing anti-racism education and training. So our district administrators have been working with Courageous Conversation in this matter. Our ethnic studies task force going strong. They met today. They've met 7 times already. And the goal is that we will have a course of study to present to you by the end of the year and also get it board approved and UC approved before the end of the year. We have a group of 20 teachers participating in the Grading for Equity professional development. And I'm so proud of these 20 teachers because they're participating in the action research where they have to choose a grading practice that they have to implement within their classrooms. And they have coaches to help them through it. And then they come back and talk about what worked, what didn't work. So some of the things that our teachers have been working on is not penalizing for late work. Some of them have excluded any behavior-related activities to the grades. So they're really looking at just improvement and achievement, and they excluded, attendance or participation and things like that, so that you know exactly what the grade truly means. So I'm very happy with that cohort of teachers. Also, we've provided training by gender spectrum. So all of our staff members have been trained through gender spectrum for LGBTQ+, and also I know that the conversation is, continuing. It didn't end with that PD that they're meeting at the school sites to discuss these topics. CSAS, which is Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, which is our significant disproportionality plan. I want to, just say that we've exited out of CSAS for this year. So I want to, congratulate our Director of Special Education, Dr. Robinson and Ms. Basuino, and making sure, and what we really do, we look at it from, what can we do to address disproportionality in the district? And then the last action is convening the Equity Task Force. So this has been quite challenging this year. Just, finding time and space for this has been quite challenging. Here's the metrics for that. We do not have a staff equity survey just yet. I've reached out to the county to see if they have something that they've used, that they can use kind of county-wide so that it could, something that we can calibrate. So they're going to get back to me on that. But if they don't provide us with one, then we'll create some survey and then ask for feedback to see if it would measure, equity, basically, perception of equity in the district. Also want to point out the educator equity rate. So this is the percent of minority staff and administrators, certificated staff and administrators. So I want to say that the first time I collected this data was in 2018, 2019, and we had about 37% minority certificated staff and administrators, and it's, steadily increasing. Not there yet, but it has increased. And LCAP Goal 3 findings, some glows is that we have a lot of staff that is dedicated to work on equity and inclusion. Again, we exited out of our CSAs, and having to work with Courageous Conversation has been great. Some of the areas of growth is recruiting and retaining staff of color. And also, one of the bigger barriers right now for us for ethnic studies is that right now only teachers with social science credentials can teach ethnic studies. And we have people in our teachers in our task force that, have other credentials that are really interested and is really impassioned about this area, but they will not be able to teach a class because of credentials. So I'm working with Ms. Mendel to see what can we do for our teachers. If a teacher had taken enough ethnic studies courses in college, can we use those credits towards some kind of authorization? And the other thing that we need to work on is a common district-wide discipline referral system. That's goals 2 and 3 and questions.
Ms. Garrett?
Thank you for 2 and 3. And of course, always piques my interest with equitable grading and the discipline matrix. I'm glad to hear that the discipline rate is going down. Do you, I guess the question is just, what are you attributing that to? Because I know that you've started a task force a while back and are really looking at it. Is it just the way you're looking at discipline is really helping to kind of keep the rate down, or is it just, well, I know there's less students obviously on campus too, but, so I'm just putting the question out there.
COVID has helped a lot. But, we have administrators that are taking time with students to try to personalize their communication with students when they are being sent down to the office, and trying to just take the time to figure out what is happening within that student's life instead of responding to the incident. Having more wellness staff has very much helped, and just being personable with the teachers too when it happens in a classroom, and how they can support the teacher and the transition. So it's just taking time.
Thank you. I'm just really encouraged to hear that we're really on all fronts, that we're trying to meet students where they're at. So, and that's always what I always want to know about. So thank you.
Mr. Archifenti?
Yeah, thank you for that. Just 2 quick questions. One on the student focus group on slide 32. It's 5% per, here on the top third from the, right there. Desired outcome for 2023-24 is 5% of student participation per site. Perhaps our student trustee, Abusria, can speak to this too. I'm sure students have input, and they've provided input. In fact, I know we had one just prior to COVID starting. There was a student advisory presentation, which had recommendations, including a Go Green committee addressing security on campus and communication with staff, and addressing implicit bias and those kind of things, and then facilities, including school bathrooms, which I know is a recurring issue in many places. Not all of our school bathrooms have been upgraded in all the ways that they need to be. But those are issues that I'm sure are being addressed in other ways. I wanted to ask our student trustee, and maybe any insight you have on where we are in terms of that item, and getting input from student trustees, and even student input since we've been back in person.
I was going to ask you about that later in the presentation, because one of the goal metrics for, I can ask it now. One of them was the Student Advisory Council survey, and like we haven't been working on one this year. So did you want us to work on one this year to get more student input?
Can talk more about it. I know that I believe when this was set, I think it was like every other year where there was going to be a survey. So I'm not quite sure if this was the year. So we can probably address that during our student advisory council to see if that is something we want to work on this year, or do we, work on it, the questions this year for the following year. So we'll look into that. But I want to point something out with this perception data from Student Focus Group that is actually from our CSA's plan. So one of our action is to create a student focus group that are African Americans. And so we have not met with the students yet. Our goal is to meet with them sometime in March. And so again, it was more like the participation rate for the CSA's plan. And the thing is, even though we exited out of significant disproportionality, the plan that was put in place in 2019 still needs to be monitored and implemented. And there was actually a plan from 2021 that was just recently approved. So we still have to follow through with those actions as well.
Thank you. My second quick question is around the finding ways to create authorization to teach ethnic studies. It's good to hear that there are teachers interested in teaching it. Of course, that's the hope. In terms of how many course units is a requirement, I know in my experience as somebody majoring in ethnic studies and working with the department, I know that there are paths that the departments of ethnic and colleges of ethnic studies, like we have here at San Francisco State, have been working in tandem with the schools of education at given campuses, say here at State or any other place, to find out how they can structure that in terms of who would be able to teach. Somebody who has a master's degree or a PhD obviously would be highly qualified. Somebody with a bachelor's degree, at least a minor maybe. There are certainly a lot of graduates in ethnic studies. I guess my question is, where are we in terms of working with CRE, community responsive education, in terms of determining some of those options?
Right now we had discussed it, and that's why I reached out to Ms. Mendel to see what can we do, how many units are needed, and also Allison Dintianco Cabales is also looking into it. And, the other way is for teachers to get their CSET and pass that in social science as well.
Okay, yeah, as long as we're working with the consultant. Thank you.
Goals 4 and 5 is about English learners receiving a green on the college and career indicator. When this was created and when there was a color in the dashboard that was back in 2019 is orange. It's one of the areas of focus, making sure that our students learning English are ready for college and career. So again, it's about monitoring their progress, making sure that they have access to the right A through G courses. We also have, monitoring is really the key, in meeting with them and making sure that they are on progress. For metrics, we don't have a color yet for the CCI indicator this year because it's been suspended. But we do have is a pathway for English learners for the college and career indicator. So we've narrowed it down to, we want to make sure that our students have access to a CTE pathway. And also, we want to make sure that they have access to our dual enrollment courses and also promote state seal of biliteracy. So goal 4 findings, we have consistent, very dedicated ELD teachers for many, many years. And we have amazing teachers on special assignment, Lisa Rubin and Lori Collins, who's been helping us with the program. And also we have Elevation to help us monitor, it's a system to monitor student progress for our students learning English. One area is for our students to just get more access and opportunity. for dual enrollment classes, advanced placement classes, and CTE courses. To tie that in, goal 5 is, this is a very interesting goal because we want to make sure that when our students learning English come into our district along with their families, that they feel welcome from the very first time they step into our district office and all the way as to, when they graduate. So we want to make sure that we have a very well-developed intake process. And so Dr. Robinson and Melissa Ambrose and the social workers have been creating a comprehensive intake process on what happens here at the district office when they first register, and then they go to their school site up to when they're taking their classes and what types of supports they are getting. And so, we haven't developed a survey yet, but I'm very, very interested in seeing, what do our parents and students perceive our intake process is, because we want to be able to provide the support that they need. Again, we still have to develop the survey, and also we need to provide training for our counselors, and so we're just not there yet. So we do have a comprehensive intake process that gathers more information. There's interviews with parents, interviews with students, and trying to just gather more information so that when the students move into their school, the teachers have a little bit of information about the student before they come in, like what do they like, what, favorite food, things like that. And also having additional district staff here to help with the intake process is so helpful. Some of the areas that we need to work on is the process here at the district level is pretty solid, but we need to work on handing them off to the school site. Because of shortages of staff, absences, and things like that, it's just really hard to solidify that. Progress monitoring for students in Daly City has been great because we have the 2 teachers on special assignment, but something that we need to really address is, our students in Pacifica and, our English learners, because we have quite a few. And the other thing that we are looking into, and this has been a big problem lately, are our 16 and 17-year-olds who come into our district from outside of the country with no transferable credits. And so we are, Dr. Robinson and Mr. Bashirs have looked and visited San Mateo Union High School and looked at their bridge program and see how can we utilize our adult school program to help our students transition and, provide better support. And that is goals 5 and 6, or sorry, 4 and 5. All right.
Questions?
Just a quick question, comment, just on goals 4 and 5. I want to say thank you for, continuing to push, I think, a focus on our students who are learning English. I think looking at San Mateo County and the Bay Area and looking at how we support our students with varying levels of resources is really important to pay attention to where we support our families as well, because a lot of them are working, and through the pandemic, a lot of our students and many of our students who come from international immigrant communities are working as well. And so I think looking for support in terms of transition and in terms of work experience and a lot of things in college and career opportunities that all of our students should have, obviously equal access to. I think it's really important that we continue the discussion and thinking of alternative ways we can support them, because, they're going to be expecting that. They should. And hopefully by the time, they're graduating high school, like our students, like all of our students. So thank you.
About our students with disabilities, and we expect that 80% of our students receive their high school diploma. So some of the things that we have been working on is to ensure that we have a 4-year plan for our students with disabilities, and monitoring their grades also is very, very important in placing them in appropriate classes. We also, again, with the inclusion, we want to increase access and opportunity, but we just don't want to toss them in that class. We want to be able to provide support for our students and our teachers as well to be able to support our students. Provide tutoring and also credit recovery opportunities. So good news with the graduation rate. Our graduation rate for students with disabilities have increased from last year. And also we are starting to monitor again their benchmark assessments for math and language arts. So something to be proud of is the graduation rate of our students with disabilities, and we are, monitoring their progress through our benchmark assessments. Areas of growth is we have students that took the assessments, but we need to work on participation rate as well, because this is the first time that this was administered. Only about half of our students with disabilities took the assessment in the from fall to winter. So we are working with our teachers and making sure that we give it to them before the end of the year. And also just time. There's always time to just really review and monitor progress is a key. Goal 7 is again standards operation. So this really includes the base program for all of our students, making sure that we have a safe, clean, well-maintained facilities, that we recruit and retain appropriately credentialed and high-quality staff, our induction services for our new teachers, ongoing professional training, standards-aligned instructional materials, parent engagement, our student voice, our communication, tutoring and basic supplies for our unduplicated students, and then we also had given funds for our sites to help target the unduplicated students. So here are the metrics and the results. We have not received the data from the SARC or CDE on the ineffective teacher rate, out of field, and inexperience. So once we have that data, I will provide that to you. One thing I want to point out, certificated staff retention rate. Again, it's an area that, it's been a struggle for many, many years since I've been here. It's something that we need to work on, and also for our administrators as well. And GLOWS is, we have lots of professional development opportunities, and the Educator Effectiveness Grant really would help us increase our PD opportunities. Our induction coach and our mentors for staff in special education have been great. Our student advisory council, very active, which is great. And again, an area is just recruiting and retaining staff, because it's really hard to implement any of this if we don't have the right staff in place. So that's goals 6 and 7, and then I have a couple more slides and I'll be done.
Want to go forward with more slides?
Right, so the supplement to the annual update, again, this is a requirement that we give an update on how are we doing with the extra money that we receive from the COVID funds. So they expect that we collect all of this data, because in the past there was really no requirement to provide an annual update to the board, but now there is a requirement that we provide one, and that this is presented before the end of February. And this information will also be included in the LCAP. So the other thing that, this supplement to the annual update is an actual template where we have to report on how we're engaging our educational partners in developing and creating this plan. And oftentimes the way it's done is that it's communicated through Ms. Pressa's weekly communication. It's also emailed to the staff. Through meetings also, we ask for feedback. And so whenever we meet with a group of people, we take their input and we try to make sure that, does this fit our LCAP goals, and what do we need to do to provide services for our students. And then these are just resources. Some of the plans, as you know, there's county now calls Plandemonium. So there's a whole lot of plans that we have to submit. And so that's just for your resources. So that is the end, and thank you.
Oh, questions?
Very impressed, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long.
That's okay.
Looking forward to when we go deeper in a couple of months, because then we can really just go, yeah, I know everybody's laughing, it's been an hour, but we will, when we get to spend a half a day on this stuff, it's actually going to get much more interesting. Not to say that this wasn't, obviously.
Well, I'm looking forward to the different template you're going to use. You are
I'll surprise you.
very surprised. See the weekend template. Wow, amazing.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work, but this is pretty much our whole district. Like, this is a summary of everything we do in terms of curriculum. So, of course, it's, an hour is still not a lot of time to dedicate to the entirety and the breadth of everything that we're trying to educate our students in 4 years on pieces of paper. So, I'm very grateful for the work that you put into this. We are known around the state for how well we produce this document, how inclusive it is in terms of its readability, the various ways that it's produced so that people can understand it. So I'm grateful. It really makes my job as a school board member easier, because I can see and track exactly what we're supposed to be doing, and it helps again with the communications from the superintendent, et cetera. So I know that it seems long, but we all of us as school board members have full-time jobs. You guys are the ones that are doing this job, and so it really helps us understand like what you guys are doing all day, because we cannot be here 8 hours with you. So and as stewards of the district, we know exactly, what you're working on and how it's being resourced and what resources you're using to support and help everyone get through all of this. It's all in this document, so thank you.
Oh, yes, I'm just trying to think of your thought process when you put this together. The color coding to make it simpler to understand, but I feel like, I don't like using this word, but you're not oversimplifying it for us. But it's so accessible and understandable, and it, like Ms. Salahudin said, it makes our jobs a lot easier. And, as far as discipline goes, during COVID, there was some disciplining going on at home, let me tell you. But, and I did make her take that assessment. A lot of her friends didn't want to take it, said, you're taking it, because Ms. Baca needs your stats. I'm sorry?
I just want to comment when you guys are done.
Okay. So, I want to thank you for putting in so much work on this. And really, was it an hour?
Roughly, yeah.
It didn't feel like it, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your work on this. It is I think a lot to discuss here, but just to remind the community, looking at this, our LCAP is our budget's reflection of the work that our district does, as some trustees have mentioned as well. To a lot of our district that have put together the work that reflected here in these numbers is really important, in our students as well. So it's a living document, and I look forward to our next discussion of that, and any input we have from students moving forward, especially this year, is really valuable in seeing how we transition back to in-person learning, not just for year one, but for year two moving forward. So thank you.
Krista?
Thank you. I'm going to be brief. I just wanted to say that having worked in other school districts and I've written the LCAP top to bottom several times, Ms. Baca really is, and her team really are exemplars of how an LCAP should be written, and not simply how it's formatted, which is beautiful, but the thoughtfulness and the focus on students is really what's supposed to happen. So thank you. You cannot even fathom the amount of effort that goes into this. So I just want to publicly thank you.
Thank you very much. And so now we're on to our action items. And so what I'd like to do is, go first to the items that Mr. Ochapinti requested to be pulled. And we will go to 13C11, is it 113? And that is the SCI Consulting Group service and consultant contract. So, Mr. Ochapinti, you have a specific question, or do you need clarification on this?
The question doesn't have to be specific. First, I wanted to say this is an approval of Estoppel certificate for 901 Campus Drive. It is the medical office building that is here at Serramonte Del Rey on our campus. This is one of the buildings.
We're looking at the SCI Consulting Group contract at 13C113.
Oh, yes, sorry. So for that one, the first one, this is a maintenance assessment district renewal and annual agreement. So one of the things I was noting in the document is that one of the rationales for bringing this up is there's an assertion in the overview on page 4. So my first question is why we're doing this, because it is an action item and it does ask to allocate $19,550 for this assessment. Perhaps Superintendent Preston, you can speak to this, or anybody who's worked on this more closely. The second foundation, it says in the last paragraph, the second foundation block for accurate assessment levies is the identification and verification of every parcel that should be included in the district's assessment role. SCI, and this is what my first question is, SCI has consistently found that the county assessor's data often contains inaccurate information to identify parcels and property characteristics. So this is SCI Consulting Group. They're asserting that a public agency is providing inaccurate information. Can anybody speak to that?
I'm actually going to turn this over to Deputy Superintendent Van Raphorst, as she.
Thank you, Ms. Presta. So SCI Consulting is the firm that we have been using for our maintenance assessment district, which has generated about $350,000 each year since 1991, when the maintenance assessment district was established. So the firm, that's their job, is to find the inaccuracies. Every district that has a maintenance assessment district has a firm that does this. They prepare the engineer's report, the assessment role, and they publish notices for us. Every year we have renewed this, like I said, since 1991, as well as the accompanying resolutions. There's one that's later on in the agenda for this maintenance assessment district. As far as what inconsistencies they find, they will be reported in that report that you will get later in the process. So each year, I think it's 3 times per year that this comes. The first time is to establish this contract with the firm, as well as give them the authority to act on our behalf. The second one will be to accept the report, and the third will be to assess the levies. So that'll happen throughout the year. It happens every year. Does that answer your question?
Part of it. Thank you for that. I understand that they do work for us. My question is, what if that's their job and they do this routinely multiple times per year? What is this contract for? What is different now? And the assertion, I still like to know why they're asserting that they've consistently found county assessors' data often contains inaccurate information to identify parcels. If that's true, why are we paying them to do something different now than they usually do?
This is not any different than any other year. This is exactly the same as every year.
The same every year.
As a board, we've approved this every year.
And we receive the report every May, roughly. Last year, we received on May 4th. And I looked at actually my property taxes just now. It winds up being about $10 per parcel annually. So
the question is, why why are these consistently inaccurate? I mean, I'm thinking about the parcel tax and the parcels. Like, if the county is not keeping track of that, has that been addressed by this firm, or has this been addressed differently? I think it's interesting because during COVID, I'm sure there's been some changes, obviously, that apply to this. But I guess my question is, yeah, what would be different this year than last year?
Nothing different. Exactly the same as every year.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So now on to 13C12, the approval of the estoppel certificate for 901 Campus Drive, the medical office building. Mr. Ojapinti, do you need clarification on this or have questions?
The approval of an estoppel certificate for 901 Campus Drive. I'll start again. It's the medical office building here at Serramonte Del Rey. It's a building here like Serramonte Ridge Apartments, which was built when the district decided to basically lease out for 99 years Serramonte High School. An estoppel certificate, as far as I understand, and anybody can feel free to clarify, if you will, is something that is usually issued or asked for when there's a change in the selling or leasing. Here, it describes that the lessee would like to sell the lease on the property, which is their right under the ground lease contract, and requires us to approve the proposed estoppel agreement. My first question would be to Superintendent Prester, whoever has worked on this, why now? Why are we asking, or why are they seeking to sell the lease on their property at this time? I know that we went through this process with Serramonte Ridge in order for them to apply for some kind of loan not too long ago, maybe a couple years ago. But I do question, given the timing of everything and discussions around Serramonte Del Rey at this time.
I'm again going to turn this over to Ms. Deputy Superintendent Van Ramphorst.
Thank you, Ms. Presta. I have no idea why. This is not something that we have any control over. If the person who is leasing the property from us wants to sell the lease, it is their right under the ground lease that was entered into in 1985 by JUHSD. So I did not ask them why. I have no idea.
So there's been no communication. They just
I mean, there's been communication, but, you know, they said, we would like to transfer the lease to somebody else. It's our right under the contract. You need to provide us with an estoppel, which is agreed to under the lease agreement. And so I worked with county council to review the documents and make sure that everything was in order, and everything's in order. So I'm asking the board to approve it. I think if the board does not approve it, we could possibly see some litigation against the board because we'd be in breach of contract. But other than that, I do not have more information.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, an estoppel certificate is, you know, if they request it by law, we have to provide it. I'm familiar with that part. I guess my curiosity is if they're asking, was there any prior communication we had with them prior and regarding something like this, prior to them asking for this, or no?
No.
So they simply requested this, like, out of nowhere?
Well, I'm sure for them it wasn't out of nowhere. I'm sure they have, you know, done their due diligence on their part for what they want to happen for their financial situation. But it's not incumbent upon them to give us any information about what they're doing in this case. That what's outlined in our ground lease is how they are allowed to use the property. So the new leasee will have the same rules as the previous leasee.
Right.
And that's all that is really important to the district, is that they use the property in a way that is in line with the lease that we have.
Okay, so just making sure, I wanted to make sure that we understood why, and if we haven't asked why, that, you know, if that's at their discretion, I understand that. But it is a very random and important, you know, certificate to be issuing, especially for businesses that reside in our property, given current discussions. So thank you for that information. And if there's any other information that we should be communicating about with our lessee or with the medical office building, I would encourage us to do that because it does affect what's happening here at Serramonte Del Rey.
To approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now on to 16A1, the delegate assembly ballot for subregion 5B, San Mateo County. Superintendent Presta.
Thank you. So I've placed the delegate assembly ballot for you board members to take a look at. It looks like there are 4 nominees and you need to choose 3.
I move that we nominate and keep the incumbents, so Noelia Corza, Clayton Koo, and Sophia Lane. They've been representing us well. I don't see the need to change it right now.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. For the 16B1 job description update on the school psychologist intern. Ms. Lujan?
Good evening, everyone. Before you this evening is a update to the school psychologist intern job description. What is captured in the job description is really just some updates that the directors of special education thought would be of benefit. So there were some things that were taken out, like specifics of what needed to be kept in terms of record keeping that the interns needed to do. So that way, every time we bring on interns, we don't necessarily need to update the job description.
There are no questions. Can you get a motion?
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Lujan, 16B2, the revised 2022-23 school year calendar.
Thank you. Good evening again. What just in case. We thought it was just certainly more forward planning.
Approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now for 16C1, the 2020-2021 financial audit report. Deputy Superintendent Van Raphorst.
Thank you, President Tejada. Good evening, everyone. My first item tonight is a presentation of our annual audit report. Siobhan & Associates is the audit firm that conducted this audit of our 2020-2021 financials. So Siobhan is here tonight. I'm distracted. I'm sorry. You've been putting up the presentation too soon. That one's for the next item. Sheldon Siobhan, who is the CPA and partner at the firm, is here tonight to provide highlights of the audit report and answer any questions you might have. So thank you so much. Yes, please. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Good evening. Are we using the mics?
Yeah, it's for the television.
Gotcha. All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, appreciate it. So we're looking at June 30, 2021, and it's good to see people in person. I've been doing a lot of board presentations on Zoom, trying to hide my beard. Got a COVID beard. Kids wanted me to be Santa Claus, but they're 25 and 18, so it didn't work out too good.
It's like my kids.
All right, so what I would like to do is really touch on what the standards are that we follow during the audit. I'm going to try to keep it very concise and get to the point. Touch on new governmental accounting standards that we implemented during the year, and then also provide the most important part, which are the results of the audit. And essentially what we are required to follow as audit firm, we're required to follow generally accepted auditing standards in the United States of America, of course, by the AICPA. And then we also follow generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And then we're throwing some real curveballs with the Education Audit Appeals Panel, right? The Education Audit Appeals Panel is a state compliance guide provided by the State Controller's Office. And then the Uniform Guidance. And the Uniform Guidance is your federal awards audit guidelines, essentially. So if you spend the $750,000 in federal award money, we are required to perform an audit following Uniform Guidance. You've also heard of that as referred to as the single audit, and also you may have heard it referenced to as a part of OMB A133. So those are the standards that we follow. And in doing that, the year-long process that we start in February now ends in February. It used to be much shorter. We end up with some results that for your district are really good. But before I touch on those results, I do want to mention that we did implement a new standard, Governmental Accounting Standards Statement number 84, which has to do with fiduciary funds and redefining fiduciary funds, removing the term agency fund from the financial statements, and bringing in the term custodial funds. It also redefined component units. And the component unit really didn't have a large impact on school districts. However, the agency fund redefinition to custodial funds and the redefining of fiduciary funds did, because associated student body funds were removed from the fiduciary fund definition for the most part, and then reclassified and moved into the general fund under a separate fund, Fund 08, or into a separate resource code or a fund and a resource code. So to do that and facilitate that, we have to record a prior period adjustment. So we're restating beginning fund balance in the general fund. And then we have to remove the fiduciary fund for the associated student body account. So in June 30, 2020 audit report, you would have seen a separate agency fund balance sheet. You don't see that anymore because it's now all wrapped up in the general fund. And so to give you an idea of what that looks like, in the audit report this year, we posted or reported a prior period adjustment of $774,000. Now that prior period adjustment is the exact balance that was reported in the June 30, 2020 audit report, right? So the activities related to the ASB are now flowing through the general fund. However, you can still track those and identify the school sites and the students that that money belongs to. So you don't lose that, it's just a different presentation and accountability. Next year, by the way, a couple of big standards coming. The main one being changes in how we present leases. So they're really changing how we think about leases and how they're reported. So you're going to see some new assets and liabilities related to that. So that's coming forward into the June 30, 2022 fiscal year, so the year you're in currently. So my favorite page to look at related to standards, and if I had this presentation up and sharing, it's just the audit report itself, is the findings section. And I really like to focus on the findings section when there aren't any findings. We can spend a long time for some of my clients on this section, especially with the new state guidelines and audit requirements related to distance learning, which was a bit of a hurdle this year. So what I like to say is that under those different standards that we perform the audit, we're required to let you know whether or not the financial statements are free of material misstatement, right? So the main objective is really, are these financial statements free from material misstatement? We don't do it with 100% assurance, of course. It's a reasonable assurance, right? A very high level of assurance, and that's because we sample in an audit, right? For the most part, there's other reasons. Now, with that being said, we issued an unmodified audit opinion, which means no findings, no exceptions, no qualifications. We did not identify any material weaknesses over financial reporting. We did not identify significant deficiencies over financial reporting, internal control over financial reporting, and we did not identify any non-compliance material to the financial statements. Now, looking at the federal awards and the major programs that we tested, which included the ESSER fund, of course, and then the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So those were your major federal programs that we tested. We're not required to test them all. We do a risk assessment, identify the major ones, and then test those. And believe it or not, it's not always the largest programs that end up being high risk. So we do, the standards require that we assess based on certain criteria. And so therefore, after we tested those major programs, we did not have any material weaknesses or did not find any material weaknesses over those major programs or internal control related to those major programs. We did not find any significant deficiencies, and we also issued an unmodified report related to those major federal programs. The state award section, quite a bit of work there. You could probably separate that audit these days. We might have to think about that going forward. But we did not have any material weakness related to the state awards, and we did not find any significant deficiencies. So in essence, what you're hearing me say is that we passed the audit.
Yay!
Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Other than thank you to Deputy Superintendent Van Raphorst for the work she's done to get us to this point. So fantastic work from you and your team.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to say that Siobhan and Associates have been extraordinary partners. They truly support us as we try to figure out all the new audit standards. And, you know, and they, of course, hold us accountable, but they also provide advice when we need it. So I really appreciate that. And I also would just like to call out Corrine and her office, too, because they are the ones that did all that tracking on the weekly engagement reports for last year and our attendance. And it's a feat. I'm really, really proud of everybody this year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, team. Appreciate that.
I mean, I would just say too that it's very helpful. This is another document that's helpful for me because it helps back up some of the decisions that we're making, especially in terms of our budget and where we are as a district that is now solidly in basic aid. And that a lot of the information here helps us track that, especially, you know, how there's nothing really solid about being a basic aid district and how we really need to look long-term into our fiscal future and the ability to have reserves. So all of that stuff all of this information is really helpful in us in terms of making fiscal decisions. And there's gonna be a lot of them coming up for the district, so thank you.
Pleasure to be a part of it.
Thank you very much. This is an action item.
Move to approve the audit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now on to 16C2, public hearing for the resolution number 2021-22/11 to seek a waiver of certain ed code requirements from the SBE in relation to surplus property. Deputy Superintendent Van Raphorst.
Thank you, President Tahada. The next item I have to present is a resolution regarding the Serramonte Del Rey property. So back in October, the board voted to declare 699 Serramonte as surplus. So a common next step the districts take is to adopt a resolution like this one that allows us to seek a waiver of certain ed code provisions from the State Board of Education. These ed code provisions are specifically about the way any property negotiations would be conducted. So getting this waiver from the State Board of Ed would allow us to have more flexibility and more local control of our negotiations. So for example, rather than having to just take the highest bidder, we could designate other parameters that are important to the district and important to the community besides price. Ms. Gina Beltramo, Deputy County Counsel, has been helping us with this process, and she's here to help answer any questions. She also made a presentation with me to the District Advisory Council on February 10th, and the participants in that meeting were in favor of the district pursuing this waiver. And lastly, I would say that we've also consulted with AFT on the matter, and they also have expressed support for pursuing this waiver. A notice of public hearing was posted on February 7th. So I would like to recommend the approval of this resolution following public hearing.
Mr. Ochapente, you have a question?
A discussion, actually. Yeah, so this item is important. I don't think we should simply be fast-tracking any decisions surrounding this property. I've been saying this for almost 1 year. It was February 23rd, 2021, when the Serramonte Del Rey project was first presented to the public through a regular board meeting for discussion, information, and approval in the same meeting, which was highly inappropriate. I asked then to remove that item. This item shouldn't be on our agenda. This agenda was approved very quickly at the beginning of the meeting. I think it's important to discuss because I would anticipate there are other members of this board simply advancing and fast-tracking this project as people have for the entire year, which is unfortunate because the public hasn't had any, if not any, real input on this. And in fact, the notice of public hearing, to have this saying it was posted, and that these are going to be posted for discussion on this without any real acknowledgement of our community's voices throughout this project is disappointing, and it's insulting to intelligence of our community. We know that this project is not just highly contentious, there's a lot of things wrong with it. It's a highly flawed project. I'm not sure it's completely legal. Looking at how the bond money and how our voters were asked to spend money on this project without knowing the full scope of it, that is extremely misleading, and if it's unethical, if not illegal, in what I'm seeing. So to ask us to seek a waiver of state requirements that would essentially bypass actual local input and instead say that local control being the board's control, that's misleading as well. I don't appreciate that phrasing of it. We've discussed this in many meetings. This issue around it being surplus property, obviously with multiple educational programs running out of this facility, is not what can be or really should be considered surplus property. And the findings of our 7-Eleven committee actually stated that this land should be used for educational purposes, among things. And so I think not only is it wrong to seek a waiver, because you're looking to fast track this project once again, it's unethical and it's highly inappropriate to be placing this on an item as an item on the agenda just after this board approved $170,000 in a misappropriation of funding that has nothing to do with education to police and surveil a community garden here on this site. So I would like to hear from board members to respond why we're seeking a waiver of these requirements, given that this project is still in discussion at the city level. We haven't seen an EIR, Environmental Impact Report, and that the discussion around what we should be doing with Serramonte Del Rey is not over.
Could I clarify a couple of points? I first would like to say that there is no bond money that has been used for anything on the Serramonte Del Rey project preliminary plan or anything regarding this surplus property, et cetera. There's not been any bond money. And as far as, I lost my second thought, so never mind. But there's been no bond money used for this.
Point of clarification, that's actually misleading. One, I think continuing to perpetuate a narrative that completely erases and omits the mention of Westmore Park is not only disrespectful to our community, but to our entire district. This project and all of the discussions that this project has included are predicated on the spending of bond money to build a new district office, for which there would be no Serramonte Del Rey project if there wasn't a location for a district office.
It was put to the voters specifically with the language that it would be used for a new district office.
That was not clear to voters. That is very clear in terms of the conversations we've had.
Hold on, because.
Excuse me, why are you interrupting me? Excuse me,
This
hold
is a discussion.
Because it's a
Yes,
discussion.
no.
Let's,
Yes.
I'm going to ask
Yes.
that you allow Ms. Salahuddin
To interrupt me? Is that
No,
what you're
to
asking?
speak.
Well, because you asked a question, she answered,
Yes.
and then we're supposed to each get guidance from the board president on who gets to speak next. But you jumped in and spoke next. You had one question answered, so we don't get a chance to speak and ask questions.
I'm
because you're
responding
taking-
and I was interrupted. So, but if you want to interrupt me and if you're going to allow it, that's your discretion as
Yeah,
president to mismanage the
you
meeting.
know what?
Yeah.
We've heard you. We
I did not finish
understand.
what I was saying.
We
No.
understand.
I'm
So
not-
You
Ms.
don't. You did
Salahuddin-
not hear what I was saying.
Ms. Salahuddin, I did hear you. So Ms. Salahuddin wanted to comment, and you did say you wanted to hear from everyone else on the board.
I do.
So,
Can you please not interrupt
Ms.
me when I'm finishing a
Salahuddin,
comment before doing that?
I'm calling on Ms. Salahuddin. She would like to speak right now.
I would just like to say it's hard to have a discussion because your comments are so long and you'll say things that are points of contention, but it's hard to jump in and have the discussion about what the points of contention because your comments are usually like 5 to 10 minutes long. And then we'll make one point and then you'll speak again for another 5 to 10 minutes. So it's hard to have a back and forth discussion when you're taking up so much of the air.
That was what you want to say.
No, that's just what I'm saying right now because I'm being accused of interrupting you and stuff, and I'm trying to explain why we have to interject.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
All right. We've heard everything you've said, Mr. Archipinti, at many meetings over the past year. So there's nothing that you're saying tonight that we haven't already heard. And we will disagree, period. Before us is this item that we have to deal with. We've made the votes and approved to move forward with the surplusing of this land. This is the next step in the process. I would suggest that President Tejada open up the public hearing, and if there needs to be further discussion, so be it, but we should probably at least have the public hearing.
This needs to have a public hearing. So if you have a question or a comment, please be brief.
I will speak unconditionally because that's my right as an elected official. Thank you, President Tejada.
But I'm also the president.
We're
So
all trustees here, we're all elected equally. We all have equal powers in this board, President
go
Tejada.
ahead, speak.
So you know. So to finish my comment, what I was saying, to clarify, bond money is the only reason we're speaking about this item on this agenda, because bond money is what started the moving or the rebuilding of Serramonte Del Rey. It originally was planned to be rebuilt here on this site. There has been nothing I've seen in terms of documentation. This is true, this is a fact, and there's documentation to show that the original plan was to be built here. Bond money was passed, and the voters were asked to vote for upgrading of school facilities. Any literature that was mailed to voters, which I received in my mail as well, shows that. So to assert that no bond money was involved in leading up to this is misleading and untrue. Secondly, to respond to fellow trustees who have been allowed to interrupt me through the president, one, we just passed a measure on civility. I have felt no civility in this meeting from
Been fairly civil, considering you have not been.
I've been accused of speaking for 5-10 minutes. I barely got a chance to respond to something that was being said. You can check YouTube and you can count the minutes if you like. These are important matters that require actually more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Do you have a motion?
I understand that Trustee Lee is very, very impatient in terms of passing this because he wants to get to the next step. It is highly inappropriate to leave our community behind, not just here in Daly City, but Pacifica, Brisbane, Broadmoor, and Coma, to pass something that has to do with the future of our district and our city. As somebody from Daly City, I expect more from this board. I expect more from this process. This is highly unprofessional. And even if you can get away with something, doesn't mean you should. It's unethical, and I would actually question the legality of passing this when our 7-Eleven committee did not recommend we take this step immediately.
You can question the legality, it doesn't go anywhere. So, I mean, you can question the legality,
Do you
go
have
ahead.
a specific question for our legal counsel?
We have counsel here.
If legal counsel would like to speak to the legality of this entire process, I've asked these questions, and I've actually been responded to with actually a refusal to provide documentation around Westmore Park, around Serramonte Del Rey project and the 7-Eleven committee. I've submitted those emails. The responses I've gotten is, can you name a specific document? If a public official is requesting from a superintendent public information is being withheld and referred to a county council lawyer who is then telling me in turn that I need to know exactly what document I'm asking for, is completely disingenuous and in bad faith to work with public officials on that level. Legally, you might be able to get away with that, but a Public Records Act request under the state of California means you should be working in good faith and due diligence to do your job as county council, not to a superintendent alone or other board members who may be taking one side of an issue, but to every single public official who is deciding on this matter. We are public officials, we're democratically elected, and if you have something to say about it, I would encourage you to put it in writing, email me with documents that I have requested for months without me having to pursue them through other legal loopholes, because every member of this board should have access to that information, including the public, so we can discuss it before making these decisions. So with that said, if you have anything to say here on public record, I would invite you to do so. But I'll also expect this in writing as soon as possible.
Trustee Archipenti, I am not going to comment on a non-agendized board item, which is what you're talking about right now. If you want to talk about the legality of the SBE waiver, it is 100% legal.
Do you want to go to so they can hear you?
I'm so sorry, you won't be heard from back there.
So, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Gina Beltramo, Deputy County Counsel.
All right, so.
Attorney for the district. I'm not going to respond to a non-agendized board item right now, Trustee Archipenti. You can take that up with counsel at another time. As far as the legality of this resolution that's before the board, it is entirely legal. It is not fast tracking. It is actually slowing the process to take this step. But it is a step that will be for the best interest of the district to allow the district to enter into negotiations. Otherwise, There are no negotiations. You take the highest bidder, and that's it. So this is for the best interest of the district to be able to negotiate with the proposal before taking it to the board for approval. And it is entirely legal.
Yes, Ms. Salarity.
So I would just say that earlier in your public comments, you said that we all need to be mindful, that we all need to be not just make accusations without evidence and back it up. But you do this consistently here, where you're accusing the district of all of these things without any evidence to show that we're doing anything wrong. One. Two, if this is fast tracking, what is slow tracking? I mean, you yourself said we've been discussing this for over a year, and it's still not complete. How is that fast tracking anything? We have followed the normal process, and if you can show me how this deviates from any other entity moving forward with the surplusing of their land and this process of going through the city council to get it approved, I would like to see it. I feel like we have done everything in the proper way. I know we've done everything in the proper way because I have been involved in most of these steps. But the constant accusations that we're doing something wrong that is based on nothing in particular is problematic for me, especially since you're continually saying that you are a board trustee of this district, that I think we need to be careful when we're just tossing out accusations. I will say that this to me is important because there's a lot of things that are important to the community, and I'm listening to all community members, not just one subset. Everybody's not going to agree with every decision that we make. That doesn't mean that we don't move forward on something because we don't have 100% agreement. No project or plan is perfect, but this is the plan that I think works best for the district, and I would like to move forward with this process.
Really?
You know, Ms. Oliver actually said what I was about to say with regards to the community, because there are many community members, there are many stakeholders here, not just one very specific group that might be a little louder than others. But we do have our teacher community, we have our student community, we do have our parent community, we have the neighbors that surround this particular property who have spoken as well, that we have personally spoken to, so who are in support. So with that, I would suggest that we move forward with the public hearing, President Tejada.
So in response to those comments, first of all,
I have not recognized you. I would like to move on with the public hearing.
so
I'm opening the
responding to that?
public
No,
hearing.
I'm responding to that because.
No, I am the president. I have opened the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Do we have anyone?
So you're just
Wait.
going to censor the rest of this conversation, President Tejada? Is that how
We're
you're running
moving
here?
on.
There's
It
a
is
lack of
within my
civility here.
right.
For your own board policy that you
Your-
pushed to pass, including
Okay,
trustee Lee.
civil behavior is polite, courteous, and
You're
reasonable
interrupting and
behavior.
censoring another trustee.
Okay,
and
public hearing
I'm
is now
responding to our county
closed.
council and another trustee, but you are
Do we
moving to
have
close
a
the
motion to approve the
President Tejada,
resolution?
Are you okay?
Move to
Are you
approve
okay?
Resolution 2021-22/11.
This discussion
We have a
is not,
second?
discussion is not over. You cannot close the discussion simply like that.
I can.
County council had comments I like to respond to first, and a fellow trustee making accusations that I'm making accusations. If you're going to close a discussion on that tip, I have to question your roles and responsibility as the president of our board.
Second.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Eger? Aye. Trustee Ochapenti?
No.
Trustee Salavidi?
Aye.
Vice President Lee?
Aye.
President Tejada?
Aye.
This is the most shameful thing I've seen of this board in the last 2 years.
You are out of order right now. Yes, you
have been out
are.
of
So
order for over a year, President Tejada.
I am
I'm not
moving,
sure
this is
you
an
have any
action item
investment in how to
16.
Observe civil
Civility,
procedure.
please. I am
Yes,
calling for civility, and
That
I'm
is what
asking you.
asking for. We've
I'm
been asking for
asking
this
you.
for over a year.
Okay, I'm going to call a recess right now.
If you need a
I'm
recess,
calling a
call
recess right now at 9, I did.
We'll be ready for this meeting when you're
9:39
ready to come
PM.
back to
I'm
me
calling
in
a
civil
5-minute
way.
recess. Moving on to item 16C3, the resolution number 2021-22/12, adopting best value procedures and guidelines. Deputy Superintendent Ben Raphorst.
Thank you again, President Tejada. The next item is about the new Adult Education in District Offices project. As you know, the project is now awaiting approval by the Division of State Architects, also known as DSA. We'd like to make sure we are ready to start construction as soon as approval is granted. In order to get ready, we need to first select a construction process. So Director Phillips and I have been consulting with Ms. Lauren Chernesky with the law firm of Danis Woolover Kelly. Ms. Chernesky has a lot of experience in this area. In fact, Ms. Phillips and I even went to one of her seminars on the topic a couple of years ago. So she has been a great partner. And Ms. Phillips and I, in consultation with her, have decided that we would like to recommend the leaseback method for this project because we think it will provide the best protection against cost overruns while still preserving our ability to have oversight of the construction. So Ms. Chernesky is here to provide the board with a brief presentation on leaseback. And then you will be asked to consider 3 resolutions that would allow us to move forward with this process. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Lauren Charnesky. I'm an attorney with Danis Woolover Kelly, and I specialize in construction and related business issues. So I'm going to give you an overview tonight of leaseback project delivery, and there is probably a little more information in here than I'll get to in full detail. But I wanted to provide a good context for the board for the upcoming items that you will be considering. So tonight we'll briefly discuss what is leaseback, recent legal developments within the last 5 years or so, procurement process overview, and then advantages and considerations. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. What is leaseback, which is going to be referred to frequently as LLB, just shorter, easier to read? Well, it is a project delivery method, which is a way of organizing the design, construction, and completion of a particular work of improvement, a construction project. And here we have in the image on the right a very high-tech graphic that I made in Microsoft Word. So we have the district in blue will execute a site lease of the unimproved property, and that's depicted by the very high-tech angled square there. So you can think of that as an empty field, but just so that everyone is aware, leaseback is completely compatible and usable with a piece of property with existing structures. In fact, you can, and I've worked with districts who have used leaseback to modernize and upgrade existing structures. You can also use it on new construction as well. At any rate, you enter into the site lease. That gives the builder the right to access and utilize the property. Builder then constructs the work of improvement according to the plans and specifications that the district has issued and approved. And here you see that delightful schoolhouse building. At the end of construction, the district will have completed tenant improvement payments for the value added to the property that the builder did. And then the builder, once that project is done and completed, and the board has accepted it with a notice of completion, the builder will lease that improvement, the facility, back to the district. And that's where we get the lease back. And you do that with a aptly named facilities lease. If you could, next slide, please. So we will have 2 key documents for a lease back project delivery procedure here. You'll have a site lease, you will have a facilities lease. The facilities lease will be the meatier of the 2 documents. It will have all of your construction terms. It will have general conditions, special conditions, other project documentation that you would see on any type of construction project. It's very comprehensive, and the district will be providing that level of detail to a builder who will need to build in accordance with the district's plans and specifications. So you will not run into a situation where the builder is building something that is not what you want. For a facilities lease, importantly with leaseback, you are permitted to use pre-construction services. That is not available under a traditional design bid build project delivery system. The reason it's available under a facilities lease is because the legislature specifically drafted a new law which said we will allow this. We see this as a benefit of leaseback. And when I say pre-construction services, I mean that your builder will be under contract and they can provide design or input on the design before construction begins. They can review it and say, oh, we think this could be a constructability issue in the field, and work with the designer to get one part of the design revised or amended prior to being out in the field and having the issue come up while you're already in the middle of construction, which can take more time and take more money to fix. They could also conceivably provide value engineering services if that's something the district is also interested in. As I said before, when the district occupies the facility, we enter into the lease back period. The district at that point will be making its lease payments to the builder developer, and that is the financing portion of this deal. Once the district's lease payment is complete, the lease back period extinguishes. The facilities lease and the site lease are coterminous. They both end, and the district is left with the property that it originally owned and continues to own, and it now owns the improvement that is on the property, which here, again, that lovely school building that we have. Next slide, please. So lease-back contractual structure, this will be very similar to design bid build in the sense that the district will contract directly with a designer, and already has in fact, and then separately, the district will contract with the lease-back builder or developer. That lease-back builder is just like a general contractor. They can subcontract the work out to others in accordance with the contract documents. And under lease-back, the work will be performed according to a guaranteed maximum price. Next slide, please. So we've talked a little bit about what lease-back is. And when people use the term, sometimes ears prick up and they think, I think I heard something about that. So I wanted to talk about what you might have heard, which is for a long time, lease-back wasn't in the courts, it wasn't in the news. And frankly, it's only really been in the news if you are a legal buff, such as myself. But in 2015, a case came out called Davis v. Fresno, and that was when one of the courts in California took a look at a particular lease-back arrangement. Now, prior to this time, the lease-back statute was in play, and it's a permitted project delivery method, but the legislature didn't provide much detail as to what's the checklist, what's the roadmap, how are we sure we're compliant with this? So you had different people doing extremely different things under a lease-back statute saying, well, we're doing lease-back. And the court was looking at one arrangement and saying, do we have a problem with pre-construction services? Does that create a conflict? Is there an issue with occupancy during the lease-back period? For this to be a true lease, we really need to have someone occupy that property, right? And then they're also looking at financing. That court, the Davis court, was concerned that the original lease-back statute, which doesn't discuss financing, doesn't require it expressly, but the court was concerned, is that something that we should read into the statute and require for a valid lease-back? After the Davis v. Fresno court, a few other cases came out with additional courts looking at different lease-back arrangements. That's the McGee and the Tabor case that are up there. Notably, McGee and Tabor differed on financing. Davis said, we think we should read financing in as a requirement for lease-back. And McGee and Tabor said, that's not included in the statute, it doesn't make sense to read it in. So now we have a split between these different courts. And then the other two courts, McGee and Tabor, also did discuss and consider conflicts of interest in pre-construction services. Well, in 2017, kind of in the middle of this, the state legislature responded and said, we've noticed this increased interest. We are going to significantly amend Education Code 17406 and related statutes pertaining to lease-back. they did that. They actually provided a greatly detailed step-by-step procedure and much more regulated system for approaching lease-leaseback, which is very helpful because instead of little guidance, now there is significantly more guidance as to what steps districts follow in order to comply with a lease-leaseback project delivery method. Also importantly, they took note that the courts were concerned about pre-construction services, and they made that special carve-out to allow them, so that is expressly permitted under the law. Next slide, please. So current day, the 2017 amendment really brought a lot of structure and clarity to lease-leaseback. Courts continue to recognize lease-leaseback as an available project delivery method. They still differ on whether financing is required. We don't yet have a California State Supreme Court opinion on that. So what does that mean? Does that mean it's not possible to use lease-leaseback? No. Our firm suggests a prudent approach, which is include financing. You will be covered in the event that the highest court comes back and says, we do think financing is required. And for it to be practical, the way that we approach it in our documents is to require the financing component, but allow for a prepayment during the lease back period so the district can avoid unnecessary additional interest costs. So we structure it in a way to avoid impacting the total cost of the project, but we make sure that you will comply with any financing requirement that a court could determine needs to be there. Next slide, please. So what is this lease-leaseback process? It's fairly detailed in the statute, so I won't go too into the weeds, but from a high level, the first step is to adopt best value procedures and guidelines. And that tonight is on your agenda as a board resolution. It's important to note with lease-leaseback, you can select on best value. In fact, you do select on best value. In doing that, the statute mandates that everyone, all districts using lease-leaseback, consider price, technical expertise, and safety record. Those three categories have to be considered. The district can consider other categories as well. Occupied sites, DSA-specific work, projects of a particular dollar amount or size, a variety of different categories or concerns that staff can hone in on to make sure that truly the district will be getting the best value for this particular project. Step 2 is to pre-qualify interested proposers in accordance with, and I apologize, that should say Public Contract Code Section 20111.6. Instead it says Education Code. It should be Public Contract Code. And that is the mandatory pre-qualification statute. Now that is required under Education Code 17406, and that is the same process of pre-qualification that can be utilized on a hard bid or any other type of project. You are looking at categories of information identified by the Department of Industrial Relations to ensure minimum qualifications for any contractors who submit a bid or a proposal on your job. Things like, are they licensed as a contractor? Have they had a lapse? Has anyone at their firm been convicted of a felony? Things of that nature. The next step after that is to prepare and then publish a request for qualifications and proposals. So this will not be hard bid, it's competitive procurement utilizing best value evaluation. Similar to hard bid, the RFQP must be published in a newspaper of general circulation. And frequently districts will also post it on their website and release it elsewhere to generate maximum interest. But again, that's one of the elements of ensuring competitive proposals here in a competitive process. The district will receive and open the proposals. Staff will review them. Very frequently, as part of that RFQP process, staff will build in the ability to shortlist and then interview from among the highest initial ranking firms. At that point, staff will complete their evaluation based on the published best value criteria and methodology that were contained in the RFQP. So within the RFQP, The district will include information about how folks will be evaluated, and proposers will know what the playing field is and the yardstick by which they will be measured. Staff will then bring to the board a resolution for the board's consideration to award the facilities and site lease to the best value. And they will provide some documentation, the numerical findings and ranking of the best value to document and support that award. And then finally, or at that time, the award will be made, and the district's plans for the adult ed district office project are currently pending DSA approval. Under leaseback, you are permitted to enter into a contract for construction services without DSA approval. That is, again, an expressly stated exception contained in the education code specific to leaseback. It is not permitted for a design bid build project. It is permitted for leaseback. And again, the legislature wanted districts to be able to get the benefit of pre-construction services. So when the contract is awarded, if the plans are not yet approved by DSA, you will have a contract with a pre-construction services amount, which will have been negotiated, would be included in the proposal, but that's for any constructability review, value engineering that would take place. When the plans are approved, your selected builder will use those to prepare their guaranteed maximum price. And they, in fact, are required to comply with Education Code 17406 in how they procure their bids, particularly from subcontractors. At the end of the day, the district is permitted access to the information underlying the GMP. So the district will basically have an open book process where staff can take the GMP, drill down into it, and say, I'd like to see the bids for that electrical work. I'd like to see this here. And it's really additional insight into how the GMP is put together. And the GMP, because of this arrangement and this approach under leaseback, and because contractors can get on board a little earlier in the process, typically they have more information when they're putting the GMP together. So it's very different from what a hard bid would be. And the district will be entitled to more information. So finally, the GMP is presented to staff reviews, and then amendment comes before the board to insert the GMP and also finalize the lease back payments and other details in the facilities lease. At that point, you're ready to start construction. So there's some lead up, but we'll talk about some of the benefits next. And before, actually, I won't go into too much detail. This is a sample timeline. We've gone from that first blue vertical rectangle all the way down to construction starts. And that's just kind of a long step-by-step process. There's a lot of detail there that we haven't even covered. But this is kind of, one sample of how leaseback works. And you see at the very end, the district will make lease payments during that leaseback period, and then both leases terminate. And if you go to the next slide, please. So the advantages of leaseback, and this is just with comparison to your standard design bid build. Best value selection. It's not just lowest price. It's what is the best value to the district. You can look at anything that's unique about your project, unique about your site, unique about your needs. That allows the district to come away with the best fit for their project. Cost control. As I noted before, the GMP is prepared once your builder has a little bit more information. Additionally, the district has access to significantly more detail under the GMP approach than you would with a hard bid. Constructability review, value engineering, to the extent you have those in before the plans are finalized, that can be a cost saver. Even the ability to start looking at that so that they can quickly address things after the plans are finalized is helpful as well. And then schedule control, this is wrapped into that pre-construction service. It's much easier to fix something on paper than it is when you're out in the middle of a field and you have to reschedule everyone to come back out and, delay work for a day or a few days even. And then generally, because of this structure and this regulated procedure, it tends to be a less contentious relationship with the builder and more of a collaborative partnership. And, I can't tell you exactly why that is. That is my experience with this method. It's not a guarantee, but it is a different dynamic. And the firms that specialize in lease-leaseback tend to lean into that dynamic. Why is that important? Well, it's much easier administration for the district, which equals saved time and saved money. And then less potential for litigation over construction claims. Again, not a guarantee, but it's a different dynamic, and that can be a big benefit. Next slide, please. Finally, what are the considerations? There are considerations. First, lease-leaseback does require minimum levels of skilled and trained workforce. Those were instituted in 2017 with the amendment, and they have escalated over the last few years. They've reached their maximum amount now. So it is a concern, or at least something to think about is, well, that is a requirement. Is that going to be a problem? I think this consideration has faded into the background a little bit because the skilled and trained workforce requirements have been known for several years now. They have been something that is out there and that multiple projects and districts have not had significant issue with. It is something for the district to be sure their builder complies with. But I would say that consideration fades a little bit into the background at this point. It was more of an unknown in 2017. And then another consideration is the quote-unquote higher upfront cost, which is to say, your GMP could be higher than if you put this out to bid. I couldn't tell you for sure, I don't have a crystal ball, but the GMP is based off of more information. And frequently, GMPs will have much more detailed allowances, which, if unused, the money reverts back to the district. And there might be different types of contingency that your builder who has more knowledge of the project wants to include. Again, you're starting with a potentially slightly higher number, but one thing to keep in mind is with low bid, what you start with at the beginning is not necessarily what you end with at the end of the project. For a variety of reasons, you could have significant change orders during the life of your project. There's no guarantee you will not have any change orders with lease-leaseback, but the way a GMP is prepared is different than a hard bid scenario. So that's something to take into consideration. And if anyone has questions, I am here to answer them.
Thank you for that. That's really, really helpful. You had me actually at pre-construction services for that, because rolling that in was really just, that's actually a really huge piece for me. A couple of quick questions, though. First off, what is the typical length of the facilities lease after construction is done?
It can vary. Our documents and when I've worked with districts, the default, I would say the starting point is 12 months.
Okay.
And after the first month, so you'd have construction ends, the district approves, the board will approve and accept the project formally through approving a notice of completion. Then there is a maximum 60-day period during which retention gets released. After that 60-day period, the district's lease back will start. And within 30 days, that first monthly lease back rent is due. And the district has the option at that time to prepay the remainder of the lease back. So could be 12 months. You could make it longer the district could make it longer if it would like it longer. But there is the option to prepay 1 month in.
And that's typically a fixed rate at that point? Or is it a fixed monthly fee, or it can vary, or?
The leaseback payments are the financing for the project, and that gets determined on a project-by-project basis. Depending on the project, sometimes that amount could be calculated as a percentage of the project or a percentage of fair market value for renting some similar facilities. That's not always an apples-to-apples comparison, so it's tailored project by project, but it is known upfront and will be inserted at the time of the GMP amendment.
Very helpful. And it also is the benefit of extending our cash flow as well, just by doing that, right? So,
Correct.
okay, that's great. Thank you. This is really helpful. Great presentation, and it just clarifies for me some of the questions I had about the delivery method. Thank you.
I think Mr. Ochapente had his hand raised.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. First question would be, so with lease-leaseback agreements, for clarity, would this allow the district to avoid competitive bidding?
This permits the district to engage in competitive best value procurement. It would not be a hard bid process.
So it would mean that our district is going to avoid the traditional competitive bidding process?
The district would not be utilizing formal bidding under Public Contract Code 20111. You'd be using competitive procurement that's authorized under the Education Code.
Thank you. This sounds like an alternative route to the bidding process that has existed for these contracts traditionally until recently, yes?
No, the amendment to lease-leaseback was recent, but it was in the Education Code for substantially longer.
Yeah, I know this has been on the books for a while. The reason why I ask is because competitive bidding is important in public contracts, as we know. Secondly, you did mention that this has been referred to the Superior Court here in California. Is that correct? You said that this is currently the case is Fresno, Davis versus Fresno Unified. Is this the one you're referring to?
Yes, there was a case, Davis v. Fresno in California.
It is currently being reviewed where?
It went up for appeal on certain items. I don't know its status right now.
Okay. I'm just looking over it. Thank you for mentioning that. Appreciate that. That's important, I think, because I have questioned the legality of this entire project. But to this point, there have been many inconsistencies and I think just legal loopholes that have been exploited by our school district. I am one trustee on this board who is not in support of essentially starting a real estate business here at our district office and adult school and GED school site, which houses a lot of programs here for the community. My concern revolves around why we're approaching a lease-leaseback approach when we haven't consulted the community fully on where we are with this process. Per the last item, which I believe you were here for, that discussion has not been ended. In your experience, I guess my second question would be, how often do you see a lease-leaseback agreement implemented in these circumstances?
I just want to make sure I'm clear about one thing, which is lease-leaseback is legally authorized by the legislature, and it is a legally permissible project delivery method for the district to consider and to use if the board chooses to do so. None of the cases I've mentioned have considered abolishing lease-leaseback. The courts have continued to acknowledge that lease-leaseback is a valid project delivery method. So I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. And then the point you were asking is what districts use lease-leaseback in these circumstances?
Correct.
And I know there are many districts that use lease-leaseback when they're considering construction projects. I've worked with a number in Southern California. I don't know of another district that has the exact same circumstances as any other district, but there are a number of schools with ongoing projects.
Right. No, I mean, I say similar because there are no exact circumstances matching any district, of course, right? So in this instance, this is why I asked that question, because I feel like it's inappropriate for our school district, given where we are and given the needs in our district. But that's my first question. I'll leave the next question to another trustee. Thank you.
Salahudin?
So just to clarify, or just to get more clarity on, especially the lease-leaseback kind of opens things up for us to negotiate a little bit more on certain items.
Correct. It allows for districts to utilize best value when evaluating proposers who are interested in performing the work. And during that, there is room for negotiation in terms of reviewing the GMP and ensuring that it is based on appropriate substantiated numbers.
The other thing in terms of the workforce and the training of the workers that are used during the build, like, do we have say over that? Because the board has really leaned towards union and prevailing wage. So with this method, can we have that be a part of the agreement, or do we have input or say there?
So skilled and trained workforce typically are union workers. And of course, your project will require prevailing wage, as it is a public works project in excess of that minimum. So if skilled and trained workforce and union labor is a priority for the district, then lease-leaseback is a good fit because it mandates minimum requirements for that.
And then another piece that I, just to get clarity on, is that this lease-leaseback system seems to help alleviate some of the burden and stress that these construction projects especially put on our deputy superintendent, like that a lot of the work would be, the management of the project would be largely to the lessee now, so that the deputy superintendent wouldn't have to be along with our head of construction, have to spend so much time overseeing it. I know we'd be involved, but it would still, the responsibility and burden would fall on them, and then it would come back to us. How does that?
Your builder is still like a general contractor.
Okay.
So the district will still have the ability to oversee the project in however it would like to, whether it's through your director of construction, Ms. Phillips, or another approach. The dynamic for a lease-leaseback tends to be a little more collaborative between the builder, and so that usually translates into less overall administration required for the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Question for Ms. Van Raphorst. Would we consider this for other bond projects down the road if we were, does this resolution then cover us for future work, or would we have to always issue a new resolution?
I think so.
No, that's up to
This just gives us more of it gives us more opportunities to use different types of delivery methods.
This resolution does not bind the district or require you to utilize lease-leaseback. It simply states that if the district utilizes lease-leaseback, you will comply with the statutory requirements for best value methodology and evaluation.
Got it.
Shown in the attachments to the resolution.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
What I really like is, I feel like we're protected by statute. So this is governed by statute, and so with the procurement process, would your firm be helping us walk through every step? Or how does that work?
Happy to assist at the request of,
It would,
yeah.
Yes,
Okay, I know.
they will be helping us with all of it. Yes, thank you.
yes. Oh, I just wasn't sure.
Got that answer. Thank you. We need a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2021-22/12.
Actually, I had another question.
Okay,
I'll second.
I'll entertain a question if it's brief.
Entertained, thank you.
Yes.
So the question is this. In your experience with working around lease-leaseback agreements, is this where a school district is interested in starting a business using its property?
That is not my experience with lease-leaseback.
In your experience, is lease-leaseback a way for districts to make money off of their school property?
That is not my experience with lease-leaseback.
In your experience with lease-leaseback, why do school districts enter lease-leaseback agreements to generate profit?
School districts do not do that. That is not my experience.
With respect to this project has been discussed by other board members almost in its entirety in terms of the sole purpose to generate revenue for our district, to fund other parts of our district without providing any real numbers in terms of what's being negotiated, even though we haven't reached a negotiation point, as you've mentioned here, that will be a later part of the process. So knowing that our district is looking at making money through this agreement, would you recommend, or are you saying that our approach is inconsistent with your experience?
I think we've veered into a topic that's not related to the best value procedures and guidelines.
So with respect to that, best value procedures and guidelines in your presentation, it described the procedure by which our district would be able to solicit bids or control bidding for contracts under our discretion without going to competitive bidding. Is that correct?
No, the district would follow the education code, which specifies a very regimented requirement for competitive procurement, including public notice, just like with a hard bid process.
In that process, there is a change to the competitive bidding process, which is why lease-leaseback agreements exist and why they've been disputed in the courts. This is something that we know because you've shown the legal timeline of these discussions, including court challenges and appeals. So what I'm asking is, and here's what I'm saying, our district entering a lease-leaseback agreement, you're telling me that the purpose of this process is not for a district to make money. Am I clear? Are you saying that?
Correct. The purpose of lease-leaseback is for a district to go through a statutorily authorized procedure to construct a work of improvement, whether that's a new school building, an administrative building, a sports field.
You're saying that this project would be a process by which we're funding school facilities, but no other facilities or no buildings that would generate profit for our district?
Lease-leaseback is used for constructing works of improvement on school district property. It's one of the project delivery methods that can be utilized for that.
When you say works of improvement, can you be clear on exactly what that means?
A work, construction, improvements to a piece of property. It's a general term because it's meant to capture anything from repairs to modernization to new construction, things like that. But lease-leaseback is focused on construction. It is not related to property usage, I think, which is what your focus or your interest seems to be.
It is, and I appreciate your clarification because without maybe knowing the full background to this project, this, in my observation, correct me anybody here if I'm mistaken, is a part of a larger process to lease away school district property that we are sitting in right now to a private developer through the consultants that we've hired to be able to profit
Mr.
off of
Ochapente?
private
Mr.
developments.
Ochapente, I'm going to, actually, I asked you if it was brief, I would entertain your questions, but now it has not been brief, and I believe that she has answered these questions pretty adequately. There is a motion and a second on the floor, so I'm going to call for a
I
vote.
appreciate your answers. Thank you for answering that. I do have additional
Call
questions.
for, I
but
am
thank you.
calling for a vote right now.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item 16C4, the resolution number 2021-22/13, adopting lease
to approve this item. Can we have a little discussion on this?
Ask your question.
Does anybody have any questions about this, first off? I don't want to be the only one to speak. I know people were concerned about that earlier.
I do not have a question.
I think you are confusing project delivery method of construction with the work that we're trying to do at Serramonte Del Rey as well with that work. What we are doing, talking about specifically, previous item, this current item, and the next item is very specific to the construction delivery method. In this case, we're discussing it for the adult education building and the new district office, but as Ms. Van Rapport has said, potentially for other work that we might do in the district with the bond that we passed in November of 2020. So all we have done is now allowed and given the district the ability to have a new way of financing construction projects that are legal within the bounds of the educational code, as I understand the presentation. That is all that we are discussing. Anything else that you bring up is stuff that you have already discussed ad nauseum at pretty much every meeting that we have discussed construction or real estate. So at this point, if we're going to have a discussion, we should be discussing the pre-qualification process for contractors, the actual document that's before us, not whether we should be building at Westmore Park or not. Because we already know where you stand, and you've already said it multiple times this evening, and it's 10:30.
We need to stick to the agendized item, and so that is this particular resolution. If you have a question on the resolution itself,
Yeah.
want to have a discussion, this is the discussion right now.
Yes. I just want to note that Trustee Lee did not speak to the item. When he spoke, he was speaking around the item in regards to something that I hadn't even spoken about yet. So on this item, which I will begin to speak on now, this is the resolution for adopting a leaseback pre-qualification process for prime contractors. The one thing that Trustee Lee did mention was that this is potentially for other work. I think it's important not to omit those important details, the fine print in anything, whether it is an election ballot initiative, which has legal precedent, and
Never happened.
these are, excuse me, please don't interrupt when I'm speaking on this. This is like the third time that's happened today. So when Trustee Lee was mentioning
If you
this,
say something false, I'm going to correct it.
excuse me, you haven't said a lot of things that are accurate in quite a while. So let me respond to what he said first.
Okay,
No,
can we,
no.
let's just call for civility.
No, yeah, call for civility. Excuse me,
Okay,
you're letting her
so-
interrupt me and
I'm
say
sorry.
things without checking what
Go
she's saying.
ahead and
Is there a reason why you
continue.
Is there a reason why you only assert
I am
when I'm
calling
speaking?
civility for everyone.
It doesn't seem that way, so let me please
I'm
continue what I'm
sorry.
saying. Thank you. So my question is this. First of all, Trustee Lee, I know you mentioned that I speak on these things. I think ad nauseum is a disrespectful way to characterize that because these are important issues in our community. I was born and raised here. I care about every part of our district. And so when I think about Westmore Park and Serramonte Del Rey, for me, as a former student, volunteer employee, and a current trustee in this district, all these questions require extensive deliberation. And so that's my first point. The second is, I haven't heard you ask almost any questions from the people presenting on these issues, which disturbs me because if you have experience in this field and you've been entrusted to work on these committees, why you're not asking zero questions and completely fast-tracking it to avoid any discussion raises concern as a public official
He asked
and as a person.
questions. He did ask questions.
Rarely over the past year have I seen him ask critical
we're only
questions
talking
regarding these
about this
projects.
We're talking about this.
So please don't
Okay.
mischaracterize what I'm saying.
I need to get everyone's attention, please. I need to get everyone's attention right now. We're not going to talk over each other.
Yeah, can you please correct
This
people who are
is-
talking over me?
I'm talking to you as well. We're all talking over each other. Let's not do that. So this is the resolution. This is the discussion. So if you have a pointed question, please ask it. If not,
Yeah.
there is already a motion and a second on the floor. And I am going to call for a vote unless you have something pertinent to
So-
ask.
The first part of pulling an item, an action item, is calling for discussion, not calling for a vote.
This is not pulling an item.
This item, this wasn't pulled. This item is on our agenda as an
I see
action
it.
item. You immediately went to call for a vote, or at least it was
It's
motion.
an action item.
It also requires discussion. This is an important item, as fellow trustees have noticed. Let me ask my question, if you don't mind. First, this is part of a larger process for approving this project at Serramonte Del Rey, which does include the moving of the district office to
It
Westmore
has
Park.
nothing to do with Serramonte Del Rey.
Does not have
It has
anything to
nothing to
do-
do with Serramonte Del Rey.
So
Serramonte
why are
Del
we
Rey.
approving a pre-qualification process for prime contractors tonight at a board meeting when this discussion has not heard any
So that
public
we
input
can
tonight?
build the district office and the adult education program through this process at the property at Westmore.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
Let's make this really general. This process is not site-specific. All we're doing is approving a construction delivery method without regard to the location of the project. We could be approving this we could have done this for the new theater at Westmore a few years ago. We could have done that. We could be doing this for
Chemistry
new
wing at
bathrooms.
Oceana.
Exactly. So all we're doing is talking about a way to build buildings.
And we'll have future work. You know, you talked about the need for future work at some of our schools. We'll have future work that we'll need to do at our schools that we know that needs to happen. We have the facilities, a survey and an assessment happening right now. So when that assessment comes back, we could use this process to do the work that we need to get done from the community input that'll be given for the facilities work. That's what this is for.
So I hear you're saying, I'm not in total agreement with it, but first thing I mentioned was Westmore Park, Serramonte Del Rey. Immediately after telling me that it wasn't about that, you said it was about that. So can you please not insult the intelligence of our community who's watching? Who I'd like to apologize. If you're hearing this and it doesn't make sense, it's because this board is continually trying to mislead the community into thinking that this decision has nothing to do with anything, when in fact it is another step in fast-tracking the development here at Serramonte.
So that is not what I said. I straight up said that
Yes.
the first thing that we would use this for is the facilities at Westmore. I said that. So I'm not misleading anybody. You are, because you're saying we didn't say that. I just said it.
So,
And it would be for other facilities that we would work to either construct or to upgrade. Facilities work on schools. That's what we're going to be using it for. And the first facility would be our district office and the adult school.
So, first of all, you didn't correct Trustee Lee. You're trying to correct me when he was trying to correct me on what you were saying.
No,
So I
because
think it's-
Trustee Lee didn't call us out into the community and say that we're trying to mislead everyone. So yeah, I'm correcting you in
Well-
that blatant misstatement that you're constantly trying to make the district seem like we're doing something nefarious when it's just you're not understanding the work that we're doing right here. The
So-
work that we're doing right here is solely about facilities. It has nothing to do with the district making money. It has nothing to do with Serramonte Del Rey, Nick.
No,
It's
this is-
only about facility work.
This is not true.
That is
not
true. That is
This district
absolutely
office-
true.
This district office should be rebuilt here at Serramonte Del Rey.
That is your
The only
opinion.
reason that it's being moved to Westmore Park is so this district
Okay,
can
this is-
create a private development here at Serramonte Del Rey.
Now
If you
you're
want to
just
continue to
saying,
perpetuate that misinformation, and that the community already knows. There are news
Okay.
segments that have run on the basis of this.
okay,
So
I'm
if you don't
sorry.
understand,
There's a motion on the floor, there's a second. There's been healthy discussion.
I haven't had a
I
chance
am
to ask a
going
single
to
question
call-
regarding this because
That is on you.
that is on our board
That
to
is,
create a discussion for our
I'm calling
public.
for a vote, please.
President Tejada, are you circumventing a second
calling
discussion?
for
Are you
a vote.
circumventing a second discussion on the item?
There was a motion and a second, a discussion, and I'm calling for a vote, and that's where we are right
I'm
now.
asking for discussion
I am
of the
calling
resolution.
for a
I haven't
vote.
even asked a question, been able to ask a question
Please
about the language
call
in the
the
resolution.
roll. Aye.
No.
Trustee Salahudin,
Aye.
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 President Tejada, question on process. Are you going to continue to cut off the discussion of items and action items on our agendas moving forward?
I have not recognized you, and we're moving on to 16C5, resolution.
So to the public watching, this is not how board meetings should be run? This is not how board meetings should be run?
16C6.
Because these items require discussion.
Move to accept resolution 2021-22/14, the least
No,
Yeah.
no, it's 15.
15, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You are still on 14.
Yeah,
Are we still on 14?
Yep, for
Okay.
the MEP lease back pre-qual for MEP subcontractors.
Okay.
Yep, so moved.
Call for discussion on this item.
I'll second the motion.
I've,
Thank you. I don't think it should be a
I've called a
motion. It
discussion.
should simply be a part of a process, which it is.
okay, I am recognizing you right now.
I
You
Okay.
want
pulled it
to
with
call for a
Andy's motion, but
discussion?
It was my motion, yeah.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
so I was just cut off for the second time tonight on an action item. This is the third item. I'm asking for some civility. I'm offering, I will facilitate discussion if nobody else is willing to, but I would like to hear a healthy discussion on these items and what they mean for our district.
It's hard to be civil, right? You're calling for civility while at the same time telling the camera that we're intentionally trying to mislead the public. So if you're calling for civility, call it for yourself as well. Like that, I don't see how that's civil discourse, Nick.
So I have been civil the entire
By
process.
telling the community that we're intentionally trying to mislead them, which is couldn't be further from the truth, by saying that I'm intentionally lying, that's civil?
You have said that this project is going to double our green space, which it is not.
We're not talking
You
about
said-
SDRs.
about
We're not
that.
talking about
So-
SDRs.
No,
So
but
what's the specific
these are
question?
all least.
What is the question?
Questions do not have to be specific.
What do you want to
Prescott,
talk about
just for
this
clarification,
We are,
Anybody can ask
okay.
a question.
let me get everyone's attention right now. We are on item 16C5 about the resolution adopting the leaseback pre-qualification process for the MEP subcontractors. You asked for discussion. Does anyone want to discuss this?
I don't. At this
So
point.
what is your question?
First question is why trustee does not want to discuss the resolution as an action item, but I'll leave that as it is, as just a rhetorical question, because it's clear that that won't be answered. My first question is, why are we approving an additional leaseback pre-qualification process resolution for a project that has not been discussed fully in terms of its scope? If we're talking about district office at Westmore Park, we've had almost zero discussion and input from the community. So why are we looking at these resolutions tonight?
We are, I think that your questions here have been answered several times already.
Can you please provide the answer to that question?
All right,
Go ahead.
since you want to keep calling me out, Mr. Archipinti, I'll be very direct with you. Once
With
again,
civility.
of course. This, again, is part of a construction delivery method that does not have to necessarily, this is project agnostic, technically. This is just simply a construction delivery method. All we're doing, we've approved in the items previously on the process to pre-qualify prime contractors under the LLB method. We approved the LLB method as a project delivery method for construction. This other item for MEP subcontractors, that's for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing subcontractors, which are key life safety contractors on a building, so that they would be held at the same standard as the prime contractor in the project delivery method. That's all we're doing. So again, the district and the prime contractor working together to find the best value contractors for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which also includes HVAC, et cetera. So that, again, it's best value for the project. That's all it is. Any discussion about whether, on the topic that you've already delved into multiple times this evening, is really not relevant to this particular resolution, on which there's a motion and a second on
It
the
is
floor.
not agendized in this particular agenda item.
So
So
thank you for description, Trustee Lee, of what the resolution is. I can read it. I know it's about contracting. Thank you for the detail. That is important. I think our public has a right to know all of those things and what it means for our district. What I did ask, which has not been answered, is given that we have had literally zero comments from the Westmore community around building a school district office at Westmore Park on top of a public park.
That's not true.
We've had literally zero comments. There was one from the city regarding
No,
traffic with a
and
city
I'm telling-
employee.
I
That
can
is a
tell you that
fact.
that's not
You
true.
can counter a fact if you want to, but it's not something we can
We
do
went
truthfully.
door knocking. There's been multiple district members that have gone door knocking, door to door. I've knocked on hundreds of doors in the Westmore Park area. We hand delivered the proposal that we had for what was gonna happen at the Westmore Park, and we gathered feedback. We talked to hundreds of members of that community that lived in the surrounding area. We did get feedback. We personally knocked on their doors and got the feedback.
So I've done that as well. I'm from the community. I went to Westmore High School, Trustee Salahuddin, and I've spoken to people in the community, and they did not say that. In fact, they told me nobody approached them. Many of them have signed a petition. There's over 4,000 signatures for a petition to save the garden and
But we're
preserve
not
our green
talking about the
spaces.
garden.
No, you just referred to your outreach in the community, so I want to address that.
That was
because
just about the
your-
Westmore Park and the adult school. It was at nothing to do with SDRs.
So this is building our district office and the adult school at Westmore Park. That is the project. Excluding that information from this does not paint the actual picture for our community. So if you neglected to tell the community in Westmore Park that that's what's happening at Westmore Park, and you're telling me now that this is only about building a new building somewhere in Daly City, that is misleading and omitting a very important fact. And,
That's per you.
and a fact-
That just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true.
We've spoken to people in the community, and they are not in agreement with this, and they have not had the opportunity
And
of
no,
input.
but that's what happens in adult conversation, Nick, that when we're making decisions, there's been tons of decisions that you too have voted for that 100% of people didn't agree on. That doesn't mean we don't move forward with it. We here, we take feedback, but that doesn't mean that the feedback guides all of the decision or is 100% of our guidance. We also take into the experience that we have as board members, our fiducial and financial duties to the district, that we need to be stewards for our teachers and our students and do the best thing. We take all that information in. So that's one part of the process. And we have been a part of the process. So for you to continually say that we haven't done something, that we have, and we've also said if we haven't done it in a way that you find satisfactory, organize a meeting. Instead of constantly complaining that we don't do something to your satisfaction, be a part of the solution. Organize a meeting and we'll show up. And you have yet to do that. But you come here constantly and accuse us of things instead of working with the board and being a part of the solution. Be a part of the solution.
Okay, so one of the things that we say in our community in activism is don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution.
Right.
Something I learned
so
as an
organize
activist.
the meeting the community
So,
outreach,
excuse
and
me.
we'll come and show up and
So
do
first
it.
of all, this isn't about me. This isn't about you.
It
This
is about you,
this
because you're constantly the one accusing us of doing the things.
I'm not accusing anybody. I'm stating facts. The community was not outreached to. Take that and think about it and let that sink in. And the community watching
It's
this
not
knowing.
too late to do the outreach.
So,
Organize something and we'll show up.
So here's what I'm saying is you constantly accuse and make things up about the way I'm approaching things without even asking me what I'm doing. You're telling me what I'm saying on a public meeting, and you're not admitting to or even owning up to the lack of outreach to our community that is clear and it has not been accounted for by the city of Daly City hasn't seen it. We haven't seen it. The community has spoken up. And I will say this. It's not incumbent upon any one trustee to do all the work in the community. Our community needs to be able to have the opportunity to speak up. So my question was, why are we fast tracking all of these resolutions for something the community has yet to have input on? Because we haven't had the input tonight.
That is
Nobody agrees that it's fast tracking.
Right.
We've been working on this for years.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we have come to board meetings, and we have come to closed session, and we have put things in the weekly updates, and you have not ever once directed one question to me or Ms. Phillips, like on email or following up or prior to a board meeting. So, you know, it's very difficult to see this as anything else but trying to perform for the public.
You know what?
And there's
That
no
is
way to
completely
answer a
false.
question that's
No,
leading
is-
like that.
That is completely false because I'm the only trustee who actually asks questions on these matters most of the time. So to say that and to say that I'm not asking questions to you per email, this is a public meeting. Our job as public trustees is not to ask.
You let me know ahead of time that you're going to ask a question, I can be better prepared to answer it.
This is
to
why
ask why are we fast tracking something, which was your question,
It's not a
is
real
not
question.
a question that I agree that it has been fast tracked. And legal counsel has walked us through all of these things along the way. So we have been complying with everything that is required.
So this project has moved along for the past year during a pandemic, when there's been very little opportunity for our community to get involved.
We're not talking about SDR though.
I have really
This is part of that
I've really got to bring us back. I've really got to bring us back to this item. Mr. Lee had his hand raised. Is there something you would like to add?
The only thing I'm going to add is, again, the only thing we're discussing is a project delivery method for the MEP subcontractors, and that they would that we would approve resolutions so that they follow the same process as we do for the prime contractors. There's been a motion that's been seconded. I think we should have a vote.
There's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Ms. Johnson, would you please do a roll call vote?
Trustee Inger? Aye. Trustee Ochapente?
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now on to item 16C6, Resolution 2021-22/15, directing preparation of the 22-23 annual report of the Maintenance Assessment District.
Thank you, President Tata. As mentioned earlier, each year, in order to maintain our participation in our maintenance assessment district, we need to take board action. There's a resolution before the board to approve the preparation of the annual report.
A motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution, item 16C7, Resolution 2021-22/16, establishing Fund 63.
Thank you. For my last item tonight, one final resolution. As you know, we're getting ready to open our faculty and staff housing. I've been consulting with the County Office of Ed and our auditors to determine the best way to properly manage the income and expenditures for this housing. And we've come to the conclusion that we should open what is considered an enterprise fund to keep these funds separate from the general fund. So the resolution before you would establish Fund 63 for that purpose.
Approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consideration of future agenda items? There are none? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, meeting adjourned at 10:51.